Hey, everybody, this podcast is both recorded on and sponsored by Riverside, an online cloud-based recording studio that is a game changer for podcasters who do remote podcasts like I do. The biggest feature that I think is the most important thing is ease of use before and after. So now, rather than fumble through some crazy IM setup where it may or may not work right, or a person might not even have the service that you use, all you do is send them a link. That's it. You log into your Riverside account, you create a new room, and then you send them the link to that, and that's it. It just uses their web browser to access their microphone and their camera, and setup is as easy as any web-based, camera-based tool. But it's not just getting started that's a big deal. For me personally, the biggest advantage is that everybody's video and audio is recorded as a separate file all on their servers. So no more my video looking good because it's recorded locally with somebody else's remote webcam feed. Both feeds are equally recorded on the server and everything is separate, which is a huge deal for anybody who processes the audio of their interviews. Anybody that had listened to my first couple heard some terrible audio because very often I was not able to separate the guest's audio channel from mine and I had to process them together, which often ended up in improper levels, pops and clicks, or some weird, crazy processing sounds, and that is not an issue anymore. You have each track individually recorded just like in a pro studio, and you could do whatever you'd like with it when you're done. And if you want to get started with Riverside, you could do so for under $10 a month for their basic plan. And as these ads go on, I'm going to be digging into features of their more advanced plans and want to show you if they're things that you would use for your setup. I genuinely love this service, and I would definitely be using it even if they weren't sponsoring me. Maybe don't tell them that, but I am really proud to be able to share this with others because I think anybody that records a podcast, whether you have 10 listeners or 10 million, if you've been using services like basic IM stuff and local recording, this will save all of that trouble for you, and it's definitely worth giving a shot. Links down below if you're interested, and thank you to Riverside for sponsoring this. All right, now let's go talk to Justin. Hey everybody, I am here with Justin from Console Kits and RetroRGB at the same time. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. What's going on, Bod?
Very confused as to why we have not done this for a long time now. I think we both just keep like getting on these calls where we chat with each other and then realize it probably should have been a podcast the whole time or something.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of the fun part, though. Like, we have a lot of conversations in the past where, like, oh, man, like, that's a good conversation to share with people.
So if anybody's unfamiliar, you have a channel called Console Kits where you have your modding and you talk a lot about Arcade 1-Up stuff, but you're also the only reason RetroRGB 3.0 exists at all. For anybody that doesn't know the story, a while back when so the RetroRGB started out, I guess, as a Google Doc. That was 0 version. And then it was on Google's website hosting, which was terrible. So that was 1.0. And then 2.0 within, this is all the first year, it made it to a HTML-based site, which was super easy to use and really fast, and for some crazy reason helped with the algorithm. But it wasn't blog style, and everything about it was just a nightmare. And I wanted to migrate it over. And I probably spent 2 full days trying to migrate it to WordPress. And this is right after I paid somebody quite a lot of money to not make a wiki for me. That was money thrown down the drain. And I get so frustrated. I had kept a folder of people who had offered to help if I had ever had web problems. And I was just like, I'm going to email everybody because I'm about to just burn this sucker down and run away and never. You responded. And not only did you help, I mean, you did everything. I mean, you made the website look good. You made everything run good. You migrated it over. That's so first and foremost, just thank you so much. I mean, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, because you didn't just help me. You helped everybody that we highlight in retro gaming and that we try to talk about in these news posts and stuff. And, you know, a lot of that just wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That was kind of my goal, right? You know, around that time, I was looking for opportunities to help out in the retro space. And, I thought maybe I could make content on YouTube similar to yours or similar to like Voltar, like showing mods. And then, I kept on watching your podcast and you were talking about how there's all these things that you want to work on, but you're stuck on all this web work. You're like, I'm struggling with this and I wish I had someone to help out. I was like, that's where I could help out. I was like, let me try to just like make it where Bob doesn't have to worry about any of that. And he can just focus at what you do amazing things for the community. And I can just like, streamline your entire website. And
Thank you.
It worked out pretty
nailed
good.
it. And a lot of the little things that you integrated too that I don't really see anywhere else, like how we have now if we feature a video that is in place of the thumbnail inside, so you're not doubling up on things. Right. Like there's a whole bunch of little stuff like that I just thought, like, it's such a neat addition that I don't always see. I mean, in fact, in most places I don't really see. So it was very cool. So
yeah, that was definitely
I mean, how did you get your start in any of this stuff? So I'm assuming you've always done web dev, because you don't just step in and do something like that without prior knowledge.
No, well, if I go way back, it's kind of weird. I was thinking about it because I was thinking about what we would talk about, and one thing that I can say is I really wish I had someone to tell me that, like, you could be a web developer or you could be a programmer or you could be a video game designer, because when I was in high school, nobody told me that. Like, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know it was a thing. It was this elusive thing that someone builds video games, and that's something that I could never achieve. And so I went on with my career in my early 20s, not doing any of that, right? Like I was an installer for satellite, right? Like that was the closest thing I knew that was like being a cable guy was a technical job that I knew I could acquire, right? Like it was reachable to me. But then I was hacking Xboxes on the side, back in early 2000, right? This whole idea that you could take an Xbox, you could mod it, and that was kind of my hobby, right? But that turned into me getting a job at Dish working on anti-piracy. Remember back in the day where you could hack your satellite televisions and stuff and get all the channels?
I allegedly may have some experience from that. I mean, it's 20 years ago, so it's way past the statute of limitations, but yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah, so in like 2005 or so, I wanted to get a job at this company called Nagra, the ones that make the smart card. And I just kept reaching out to them just over and over again, being like, I want to work for you. And the reason why is because, I was struggling with, I wanted to hack things, but I didn't want to go to jail. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that was kind of my only way to be like, could I somehow do that for a living and help out, in that, and, in that piracy space? And eventually I got the job. And there I learned from all these engineers that helped me. They're like, you could code. I'm like, I could code? They're like, yeah, let me teach you how to code. So like coworkers just helped me. And my next job after that job was software development. Like I always got jobs in software development, but it was really coworkers that like kind of taught me that skill. And now that's what I do for a living. So I just wish more people knew that like those things are attainable.
That's pretty neat. I didn't really, I never really looked at life like that. I guess I was always such a pompous ass that I was like, this is what I feel like doing. I'm just going to go do it. But I also was always kind of had access to computers. It was always like, the bottom end, lowest of the low, but that kind of was even more of a help, because then that forces you to learn how to fix them when they break and how to put three together to make one that doesn't suck as bad. And so I kind of always was like, well, I'm going to be doing something in technology. So I already got it right in front of me. I'll figure it out. But it's a good point. If I wanted to become a game dev, I wouldn't have even known where to begin at all.
Yeah.
Like pre-internet, it's not like you could just jump on LinkedIn and be like, looking for people that work for companies and see what background they have. And like, okay, well, let's, maybe I'll take that path. Back then it was just like firing an arrow in the dark and hoping you hit something,
Right. And that really led me back to kind of console modding, because my kind of like the origin in technology was, Xbox piracy or Xbox modding. And I wanted to get back into that, but now I'm in the industry. Like, I'm like a software development and I'm like writing code that for companies that don't want their stuff hacked, if that makes sense. And I was like, how do I get back into hardware And then I found you. I found you and other people that are doing mods, like legitimate mods that don't put your things at risk.
Yes.
Like where you could put NES RGB and sell these on eBay or sell these to your friends or whatever. Kind of make a little modding shop. And what is Nintendo going to do? Like, you're not sharing ROMs, right? Like,
legal.
it's just enhancing the product.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so, yeah, your website became a resource really for me. And then I was all like, I'm always like on websites on my phone, and that was one of my, I got to help out Bob so I can make it like easy to read the tutorials on my phone.
There was no web version at all. It was just, you had to pinch and zoom for every page. That was horrible.
That's right. But yeah, no, thank you for all the, in the past, there was just so much, and that's the thing. Like it's become a hobby because I have access to information, which I otherwise wouldn't have access unless there were people like you that were like building websites and sharing that knowledge.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I've been thinking a lot about that because I'm reconciling, because I have this background in modding and doing, I did high def NES, I did NES RGB, and now my channel and what I speak about is pivoted into Arcade 1-Up. And it's this weird thing. Like, we're like, oh man, you know how to do all these things. Why don't you just use a Raspberry Pi? Or why don't you just do this? Why are you playing with these toys? And it's like, well, what's interesting is for some reason the algorithm found that, when I talk about Arcade 1-Up, it has more reach, a lot of reach than I ever did when I was talking about modding. But these people that follow me, right, they are getting into the retro space, right, that which otherwise wouldn't. It's really surprising. It's like the universe is expanding, right? It's kind of like that. It's like when the NES Classic came out. Do you remember that? Like, you could crap on it all day long and be like, oh man, the Sega Genesis Mini is horrible. Like the M2, they did a horrible job. It's got all this audio lag, and those are all facts, right? Except the other way to look at it is it expanded the universe, right, of retro gaming to more people.
I agree 100%. And I really have been always, especially the past few years, trying to change the way I word things to make sure that people know exactly what my intent in the statement is, which makes me even more freaking rambly than I normally am. But it was really bothering me when people were saying things like, oh, Bob thinks you're a loser if you don't have anything other than original consoles that are RGB modded and perfectly. And it's like, that has never been what this site's about. If you want to do that, of course, that's, we'll be happy to.
Absolutely.
But I just always want to make sure people's expectations are in check, right? So if you play turn-by-turn RPG games on your SNES, go grab one of those $10 garbage cables and, just know that it's terrible, but it's not really going to affect that game. And it's the same thing. Like, those classic consoles are such a great gateway drug for people to get back into this. Or on the flip side, if they really did just want a blast of nostalgia, then that's it. They spent a little bit of money, they got that, and now they're done. And if they want to do that again every couple of years, cool, but they didn't lose a huge investment of time and money. So I love those things for what they are. I just always want to make sure people understand the other side, because unfortunately we live in a world where, all of these blogs and stuff just copy and paste press releases and don't actually test most of their stuff. So there's all these reviews of like, isn't this awesome? You could play 40 NES games on a little box that looks like a Nintendo, but nobody actually puts it into perspective. So very often I have to take the opposite side of things just because nobody else is. But you're 100% right. And I love all that stuff for those reasons,
Right. Yeah, I still try, like, I can, because there's only a handful of like Arcade 1-Up YouTubers in the scene out there. So, and I'm one of them. And so that kind of lends me to have access to the people at Arcade 1-Up. I mean, I used to do a podcast with Retro Ralph, and we would have, executives from the company on the podcast, but I would talk to these people, and like when their first generation came out, I was like, the board that you're using is using, it's a single core processor, it's outputting 640 by 480 and then jumping up to this 5x4 resolution, and it's got shimmering. I had to explain all these things to them, a lot of things that I learned from you and from other people in the kind of RGB space. And then they came out with a second version, and I kept on pushing like, hey, you got to do this. And when by the third version they came out, it's native 960p. And it's on a 4x3 resolution. And I don't know if I I know I've played a part a little bit in improving their quality. I may have accidentally increased their cost perhaps, but they're moving up, and now this, if you've seen some of their latest stuff, Arcade 1-Up is coming out with, that we've been pushing, is try to make the cabinets actually look like the original. And they finally did it. If you've seen the new Mortal Kombat cabinet that's coming out this year actually looks like that midway
Yeah, I saw your
design.
video on that, actually.
And now they're coming.
It's expensive, though, right?
Yeah, and now they're coming out.
It's expensive, though, right?
What's that? We think that one will be $5.99, but it'll be, online. You'll be able to compete with other people on those Mortal Kombat games. And so that's kind of cool. And that's the other thing, like, a lot of people don't know about the Arcade 1-Ups. Like, in that first generation, they were using MAME, and it was basically like a Pandora's box, like, sold at Walmart. But now they're using, like, companies like Code Mystics, Digital Eclipse, Other Ocean. These companies that have been in the emulation game commercially for a really long time, well respected. The new Killer Instinct is supposed to be 60 frames per second without any lag, which is remarkable. And so it's kind of cool to see that space evolve and grow, where it's still not the same as an original arcade or CRT, but they're closing in on that.
Yeah,
now.
I've always had such
so that's cool.
Such polarizing but strong opinions on both sides. Because first and foremost, nobody in their right mind who's a casual gamer is going to go pick up a CRT-based arcade cab. They weigh 1 million pounds. There's always going to be something you need to do to fix them. And on the flip side, a ton of people who are like, oh, that looks neat, would totally pick up a box that's not that heavy, go home, assemble it, plug it in, and there you go. Mm-hmm. And it's always just the middle ground for stuff like that, where it's like, first of all, if you design a product too good, it'll never launch. It'll just be, it'll be just sitting on the dev floor forever. So you have to just get some stuff out. But where do you draw your line? And that's been my job, a big part of my job for a million years now, and any of the product development I've been a part of. And there's the Steve Kulovs of the world that would rather just wait 30 years to release something and make sure it's because they just take it so seriously. They don't want to release a shitty product. And then there's the type of people that are like, does it turn on? All right, ship it. And I always try to find a happy medium. And I got the really strong impression that entire first run of cabs from them was like, does it turn on? All right, ship it. We got the license. We paid our license fee to Capcom, so we're good to go. And that's the stuff that pisses me off, because it's like, you don't have to over-engineer it. Another thing, like, oh, what's the matter, Bob? Everything can't be an FPGA-based flawless. Like, no. But you could spend more than an hour slapping MAME on a single-core board that you bought for $1 on AliExpress for your prototype. You could just price some things out, and you could try to find things where in bulk it would be about the same price but faster, and all the dev stuff that that you all know about, of course. But like, you could put a little bit of effort into that to have made, you could have just reached out to people in the gaming scene, knowing that they're going to have too harsh of opinion, but take from that what you will. And they did none of that. And in fact, a couple of people I know in the arcade scene, they invited to go take a look, and then they found out, like, oh, wait a minute, this is for real? Like, this is like tournaments, not like just a bunch of people having fun. And then they ghosted them because they didn't want them going. And it was just like, well, I completely understand why they did that, but it just, and on the flip side as well, how many people, and it's got to be a lot, by the way, but how many people got back into all of this stuff because they saw one of these things on sale for Walmart at Walmart for $125, and maybe they liked it, maybe they didn't, but that was their arcade gateway drug. But on the other side of things, like I always use the example, how many people bought one, assembled it, started playing it, and they're like, is this what Street Fighter was like? Well, this is a fucking waste of money, and then just give it away to their neighbor and then never go back to gaming. So it's it's why I'm always very harsh on companies like that, because you got to try to find that sweet spot. And just like the classic well, maybe not the PlayStation one, but like the NES and Genesis and the SNES classic consoles.
Yes,
it looks like it, and the controllers are like it, and you have the beautiful menus in all of them, and like it really does accomplish almost everything that you would want to get people in at the right price. And I just kind of, if you could turn back time, I would ask Arcade 1-Up to think about that before they dumped a whole bunch of garbage on the market for the first year.
That's right. Yeah, that first year was pretty bad, but now I think they have an obligation. they've sold 3 million cabinets. So they are officially the most successful home arcade product that has ever been, released. We're talking about they sold more. This is hard to say. They sold more Pac-Mans than
the original
back
Pac-Man.
in the day than the original Pac-Man.
Crazy.
So the original, now it's different, right? Those threw quarters in, and these are something you can buy at Walmart. But they do keep on releasing and increasing the quality. So at least we're now at like a quad core processor, right? So Raspberry Pi 3 level, maybe into the 4, not quite there. And as they get into higher quality games that demand a little bit more, what they do, which is interesting, is they make a decision: do we jump to a chipset that can basically run like Dreamcast level, or do you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and pay an emulation company to get the emulator to run on a quad core? And either way, this is another side of it that's really cool. Arcade 1-Up is funding huge contracts to these dev teams. Like there's this new company called Bash Studio. It's a startup. It's a brand new company with a handful of developers, and they've worked on emulation in the home arcade scene. This other cabinet that I have behind here is called the iArcade, and it plays games that you can download games onto. You buy the games a la carte, and they work with indie developers, right? And so what's cool about that space is it's not only something cool for the customers, but there's companies that are kind of being funded, and they're making money off of these commercial products. So it's good for the whole space.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a lot of people don't see it from that angle as well. Is that if they're dumping a lot of money back into the community, whether it's hiring developers or getting the stuff promoted, that does kind of help everybody as well. So it's always something to keep in mind with this stuff. And I don't know if there would ever be a need for a pro level Arcade 1-Up cabinet. I mean that with respect. I don't mean that as a dig at all. I just think that in the fighting game world, you have all the modern consoles, and you have people that are going to be switching to FPGA for the tournaments at some point, because it's going to be infinitely easier than trying to deal with finicky arcade boards. And it's just, if they go through a certain amount of testing and they deem it good enough, it's just not something that, something like an Arcade 1-Up would cater to, and they shouldn't. I just, I'm glad to see them trying to aim to hit that sweet spot. But the price point is also one of the things that I always loved about it, is that if you checked on, on like a website that you were working on for a while, where you could find good deals on them, like that to me was exciting. Like, holy crap, you can get one of these for $150. That's great. But like, now it's like $600, and now you start getting in the territory of, well, that's getting close to something that I could build my own or integrate other things. So I wonder if they're going down the wrong road again or something. It's easy, it's easy to speculate, obviously, when you don't have the whole picture, of course, but
Right. This year will be interesting. So I did bring back my site. So consolekits.com is back, and I'm tracking now all the retailers. I'm continuing to integrate. I rewrote it from scratch, but basically if you go to the website, it ranks it right now at the lowest price. And so you can see they also have these other, Arcade 1-Up has these units. They have so many different models out there, and there are deals. The deals are still coming. Like there was this Tempest cabinet that's normally $450 that was at Nordstrom of all places for $269 for about a week. And I updated my website to reflect that. So I'm building bots that'll basically scrape all these different sites to try to find the best deal. So more people, it's really about, growing that space. But and more people can kind of enter and get into the hobby. And I've met a lot of people that it was a gateway drug, either a gateway drug into real arcades or vintage arcades, or there's some of them that I've worked with that are getting into more of the RGB space. Like they buy, all the different mods for their Nintendo 64 now, but it kind of started with Arcade 1-Up. But this year they are coming out with 4 Pro models, and that'll be interesting. Yeah, so they're 19-inch screen, 67 inches tall. They're taller, they're wider, there's no riser. And so they are venturing into that. We're going to try to build it for the pro community, but it's going to be $1,000.
I mean, if it's got an FPGA board in there, then that would be amazing. but I don't think it's going to. So
Yeah. No way. It's going to be the same quad core processor that they've been doing recently, but it does have haptics and buttons. They're kind of going to the the what the community. I think some of them may even have Sanwas in it. It's a larger screen. The whole thing's taller. I'm curious to see how the market responds to that, because when you're getting into those prices, yeah, for $1,000 you probably could pick up a vintage unit, right, with a CRT, and it's going to be great, but it's also going to be a lot heavier. So,
and it's going to need repair and all the other crap that goes along with it. Yeah, it's interesting. It's I'm glad that there's people like you out there keeping a very level-headed view of this. I've talked about it before on the weekly roundup about how I appreciated your take on some of it, and occasionally I'll get a little grumpy because I'll play 3 arcade 1-up cabs in a row that all suck, and I just forget that I think you told a story about how you had a family party at your house, and you went down and there's a whole bunch of little kids playing on these smaller sized arcade cabinets, loving the experience, and it's like. It's something that I often lose sight of when I start to get grumpy about this, and it's like that's no 6-year-old kid is gonna, well, I'm sure like little Arturo maybe, but no normal 6-year-old kid's gonna be like, there's too much lag in this cabinet, like bring back my Mister, this sucks. So it's just gonna be like more of a chill experience to have. So yeah, it's I hope they find the right groove for it, because obviously if they sold 3 million units, they're it's almost tougher to talk to companies when they start selling like that, because it's very easy to get the attitude of like, I'm right because I sold 3 million units. You're obviously wrong because
right.
So hopefully they're just listening to feedback and finding the happy medium. Price is huge though.
Yeah. What I'm excited about, I've learned a lot from it. Like, I was never exposed to like the Williams games, like Defender or Sinistar. And what kind of brought me into it was, now I'm making videos on like how to mod things, and there's different companies that are making different control panels that work with the arcade 1-up. And so I wanted to play some of these kind of arcade titles. Then they came out with this thing called a Partycade that just like goes on your wall. They're only $200. And we've been pushing arcade 1-up a lot with like, can you just make, your control panels much like the original? And they did it on this Partycade. It's a Defender control panel, right, that like all the buttons are kind of laid out. And so I got it because I almost wanted to like reward them. It's like, oh, you did it, you did the thing we asked. And for $200 it's a really good value. And then my daughter got into the game Sinistar, which I had never played as a kid, and it's a fantastic game, and it ported well over into their system. It doesn't have a 49-way joystick like the original, which I've heard that they might be working on in the future for like a bigger cabinet. But again, like it's growing that space. Even my family, my sister came over and she was playing all these old Defender games. She's older than us, and she never played these games, but they were perfect for her. They were like just her style. She played Miss Pac-Man and then got stuck on the Defender cabinet. Like, she was playing that the most. I was like, this is cool.
Yeah. I'm always, so I remember watching your review and then a few other people's actually about the Star Wars arcade cab and stuff like that. I was just like, such a big part of that experience was the controller. And they had it. They had, a reasonably priced version of it that most people thought was totally fine. And enthusiasts, even, even the grumpiest of the few, seemed to be like, this is totally fine for what you're selling, but we're going to offer, a crazy, more accurate version that you could install, which was awesome. That's the type of thing where I'm like, okay, I'm glad you spent the time doing that. I'm sure that wasn't easy or cheap to go out and make sure to do that stuff. No. And I get excited about that. I don't get excited when it's like, okay, now we have 3 new color options that we're so excited to talk about. It's like, oh God, I could just buy a sticker kit if I really cared about color options. Why don't you talk about something that matters? I think maybe those guys just rub me the wrong way though, because I've worked with salesmen my whole life, and I'm one of the rare nerds that actually likes most of the sales teams I've worked with over the years. But there's just something about them where they strike me as a cross between like like your stereotypical sleazy car salesman and like a morning radio TV host, where every time they talk, I'm just like, hey guys, have you seen the new Arcade 1-Up stickers? And I'm like, oh man, what are you lying to me about now? Because I feel like no matter what falls out of their mouth, it's not the truth. And I'm like, which is a horrible thing to say. They're probably two wonderful human beings with nice families and that do good for the world, but it's just, sometimes two people aren't going to get along. Two good people aren't going to get along. But those two, I can't even listen to them. I don't even know if they're still there. It was a couple of years ago, or a year ago was the last time I saw them interviewed. And I'm just like, oh man, I don't think these guys are for me.
Yeah. And it's kind of fun, having a channel that focuses on that. I see a lot of comments from the community, and I take all that in. I read everything, comment back and try to understand, what's going on. And what I've learned is really interesting how, it started out, you got Gen 1 and everyone was focused on, the quality. And then what kind of shifted is once the quality improved, there's a scene of people that are just like buying all of them. You know what I mean? It's like, it's this weird, like, we're talking about, there's some people that have like 26 Arcade 1-Up cabinets. It's like they've filled their entire room. And I have many, but not that many. And I get the idea of getting addicted and wanting to do collections, but the constant feedback I've been getting from a lot of people is how they want diverse cabinets, which I don't know Arcade 1-Up ever thought of that. It's like every different cabinet you come out with, I want it to be like 100% different. Like this is a race car cabinet. Like it's got a steering wheel on it and you can play those games. Then give me a fighter, right? Then give me like a Tron style with a stick. And now there's this new interest of, I'm selling off this X-Men Marvel and I'm selling off my Street Fighter because I only need one fighter. You know what I mean?
That's a really...
And maybe you'll mod it and you add more games in it, but I want a Golden Tee, right? Because I want something with a trackball, but I don't need two trackball systems.
Yeah, I wonder for a business model like that, it would be better for them to just, discontinue everything they have except whatever is the cheapest to manufacture, and then do exactly what you just said. And like, here's the 6-button 2-player fighter, or here's the 6-button 1-player fighter, if it's smaller and cheaper or whatever. And, here's the flight stick and here's the trackball. And on each one of those, you could also plug in a USB controller and access a web store where you purchase games. I think, I think that would win for everybody, because to be perfectly honest, as much as I'm the guy that has every ROM ever made on a hard drive over there, if there was an interface that I could easily use in an experience like that, where I could purchase ROMs and not have to mess around with this stuff, I would totally do that 100%. Just for the ease of use. If they're $30 a game, no, but if they're reasonably priced, yeah, right. I would love to do something like that. And, maybe sell sticker kits on the side so that your fighter could be whichever one that you want. And I think there's so many different options, but price is the killer. You got to figure out how to do all this stuff while making sure people could actually afford it. Because, I know there's been a lot of inflation and there's a lot of people with extra money to burn now too, but there's also not. And that's, I think that's something that, but they're still selling some of the cheaper versions, right?
Yeah, they have like these things called countercades. So they go on your counter. They're like a little bar top arcade, and those are like $100. They got the partycade. There's actually a new thing coming out this year. We learned about it from FCC filing. Anytime there's a unit that has Wi-Fi or 2.4 gigahertz, they have to get it certified by the FCC, and then you can find those and kind of see what the entire model is. And this is the one I think is actually going to blow up potentially. They're calling it a couchcade. So they're just selling you the control panel. Oh. That's it. And it comes with a dongle, and we've seen some of those before. It's HDMI, goes to your television, right? And it's 2.4 gigahertz wireless between the control panel and your television. And the reason why I think it'll be popular is one of their hit titles that they're going to do is Golden Tee. So imagine you buy this thing for, let's say, $200. It's got a trackball on it. Put it in your living room, and you play Golden Tee. Yeah. And it's portable. Your friends come over. You literally hand it to them, and then it's in their lap, and they'd have their turn.
And lag would not make the slightest bit of a difference in that scenario, because that's not reaction. You're just aiming and spinning. You still get that's actually the perfect use for it. Have you ever tested wireless HDMI out of curiosity?
No, I personally I haven't.
Oh
Have
yeah.
you played with that?
So back in a million years ago in another life, I was doing dev work for a company that made medical grade computers, and we got to see
Uh-huh.
some of the early betas of that. And I used to be able to get invited into like the private rooms at CES, and it was always terrible. And I could always break it,
Oh
which
man.
my old boss would just. At first, it would piss him off, and then he just started to get so amused by it. Where every single demo for this stuff, there was all oh yeah, this is flawless with no dropouts. They're like, oh yeah, give it a bob, and it's like, okay, hold on, I gotta just warm up my cup of coffee here in the microwave here, and oh wait, no, there's no signal anymore. Of course there isn't. But yeah, it was really bad for a long time. The last time I messed with it, definitely lots of frame drops. The lag wasn't as
Mm-hmm.
bad as one would expect, but then you're back at the mercy of your surroundings. So if you're in the middle of nowhere and no one's running a cracked microwave or something like that, you're probably going to, for Golden Tee, it would be
Right.
totally fine. But you go into the middle of a city
Yeah.
with a bunch of wireless interference, forget it. Or if you live in a dorm room where there's 40 kids all in a three-story house or something like that, you're gonna start to
Mhm.
get into scenarios in which this is not going to work. And yeah, no one seems to
Yeah.
get that still. The closest thing I've seen were things like tethering games from your phone to your TV, but I believe when that's happening, it's just the commands that's being sent back and forth, not the video itself. I could be wrong.
That's right.
Maybe it's different, but
With this, yeah, with this Couchcade that Arcade One Up is doing, I looked at the specs on the FCC filing. It's clear that there's, the Raspberry Pi device is
oh,
behind your TV, and that's what's playing the game. And it's 2.4 gigahertz. The control messaging is the
all
wireless
right. Well,
part.
let me. Everything I just said is completely false and bullshit. Then, because then they're just translating
No, no, no.
commands.
This proves that like they made the
Yeah.
right design choice. They did not do wireless HDMI, and that would be extremely laggy, just like you're saying. And this may probably have 1 or 2 frames of lag. Pretty much every Arcade One Up unit out there, one way or another, is going to have some. It's
Yeah.
not going to have perfection, and that's the thing. Just like it's basically comparable to the NES Classic, right? Like there's lag,
Yeah.
right? It's just not.
But I mean, if
horrible, right?
if the new Neo Geo, and I forgot the name of the company that did that, but if that new Neo Geo cab could pull off totally fine for a somewhat okay price, I do think that was a little bit too expensive. Then they could certainly pull it off
Right.
too, because I know it's two different things. I know Neo Geo is a platform that probably has, since it's one platform with multiple games, there's more chance that more people were working on the emulation for it. But still, I mean, that was
Mm-hmm.
Unico, I think was the company. Yeah, if their engineers could pull that off, then
Yeah.
it should
Unico.
absolutely be, be possible on other stuff as well. So, I imagine that 2 frames of consistent latency with only a little bit of variance would probably be something that they could totally pull off. And that, hey, even Beast said, like, if it's as long as that was consistent, he was able to adjust his moves in just a few minutes of practicing on it. It's only the variable latency, like the Genesis Mini, and stuff like that,
Yeah.
where you go between 3 and 7 or
Right.
something. That's when you start to just not even be
Mhm.
able to play past a certain level in most cases.
Right. You can't even anticipate the lag because it's always
Yeah.
changing on you, right?
It is funny too to hear people say they beat
Yeah,
games
so-
with those, and it's like, I wonder what the theoretical chance is that every time you press the button, where it mattered, you were a lesser set of, it was on the lower side of latency than the higher. I wonder how much that had to play into it, or if they were just lucky.
Right. So, I mean, you live in New York, so you're familiar with the New York fighting scene. I'm curious about that. Like, so one of the things Arcade One Up is doing, they have this new Big Blue cabinet, and it allows you to play Street Fighter online. There's this entire lobby system, so everyone who has the Big Blue Arcade One Up cabinet can go in and compete with other people. And now there's new YouTubers like this channel called Put Your Quarters on the Glass. Basically, their entire YouTube channel is I'm going to broadcast tournaments, and it's from the Arcade One Up. So he has a dongle that does HDMI out, uses OBS and stuff, and he broadcasts that to people that are watching it. It's growing and following. He gets about 100 to 200 people live just watching these tournaments every Friday. And so, but I don't know if it can compete with the tournaments that you're familiar with. When the world was normal, like in New York, they're pretty popular, right? Like, But what do you think it would take
It,
for
the
kind
software
of
that
to
they're
bridge those
using
two?
is going to be the biggest thing, because when Art did a couple of cloud parsec tournaments for Retro, they
Mm-hmm.
had servers running in
Mm-hmm.
AWS. They
Mm-hmm.
had both players load up parsec, and that's a piece of software that's like a remote access, which is oversimplifying it to the point where if any of the team were near me, they'd probably slap me. But remote access software
Right.
done really freaking well. So
Right.
the user's inputs and the screen, it's not like they were uh I'm trying to word this properly, in that everything was processed in a way where it wasn't like you're copying the full experience. So the button presses were being processed separately than the video, which is how parsec works. Once again, a very horrible oversimplification, so that you're able to get them in at lower latency. So like if there's a video buffer naturally,
Right.
you could bypass that, but you still have at least one frame of lag over the internet. And people were able to adjust
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't like you're running it off of my machine. So I have zero lag, and then you would have whatever it took. Everybody was going off of the cloud onto their machines. And it took some adjustment. And I guess the consensus was it's totally fine. It's not the same, but there's a lot of
Mm.
factors that would never allow that to be the same. Part of just being in a room with a bunch of people and you feel that weird energy where like anybody could pop off at any time, but somehow it's happy and not nerve wracking. Like you'll never get that, across the internet. But I don't think anybody's trying to either. So yeah, it's something that's
Right.
totally doable. But they would have to make sure that things are running in the cloud when they connect. Which, from a software point of view,
Mm.
that seems totally doable. That when you're not connected to another player, you're just playing off of your machine. But when you are, especially for these tournaments, you're on a cloud, and I imagine that costs money. So I would think it would be the right
Sure.
thing to have casual online play for free, but tournament play you'd have to, X amount a month or whatever it is, because you're paying for a cloud servers.
I
But
see. Yeah.
I think it's totally doable, and I think, I just think it comes down to what market is going to do that. Because the other thing that you'll notice when you go to pro fighting tournaments is everybody has their
Mm-hmm.
controller. Some people show up with a PS2 controller and a
Oh.
Brook Retro converter. Some people, like, I don't know why, maybe I'm just a
Right.
meathead, but I have that giant Vulix arcade stick I bought from Art. It weighs like 3,000 pounds,
Uh-huh.
like, yeah, but it's perfect. You could sit it on your lap or a table, and it's sturdy. I just immediately found myself playing better with it, and I think everybody's stick is like that. So when you get to real pro level tournaments, I think it might be interesting to see how people react to that, because even all of the cabs, in a lot of the places in Brooklyn, not only do they have the sticks on the cabs, but they also have undammed
Mm-hmm.
adapters and USB ports, so people could sit in
Ah.
front of the
Yeah.
cabinet and bring their own stick. So it would be interesting to see how they handle that. Maybe simply adding a low latency USB port is all that would take. But
I'll have to play with that because they do have these newer cabinets do have USB ports from Arcade One Up for controllers. I don't know if they consulted with someone in the pro community for that or it's just a coincidence. They wanted to add more features, but I'm kind of thinking through it. It's like At Games, which is another home arcade system out there. They have what they call the Arcade Net, which is in the cloud. They have like Neo Geo games that you can play with other people. Like you can play Metal Slug type of thing, and that game is running on a Linux box in the cloud, and they're basically streaming MPEG to the devices at low latency, and you can kind of see a meter, and it shows like what your latency level is, and it's not the greatest experience, and it's all right, but then this newer company iArcade in 2022, they're coming out with another cloud-based. All the games that they have, I think they have about 300 games that you can buy. Things like Burger Time, Windjammer, Space Harrier. They don't have big titles, but like they have
hmm,
big publisher titles. So Sega is a part of it, so they'll probably grow over time. But they're coming out with an online service, and it is in the cloud. It is. They say when you go to that mode, the game is running in the cloud, and then you're streaming. However, Arcade One Up is all netplay. They don't do any cloud-based gaming. It's you have an emulator, the other person has an emulator. They have a lobby, and that's a server that's connecting you. But after that, it's
hmm.
peer-to-peer. Like it's not running through the cloud. It's peer-to-peer, and some people have struggles with that because they have to work out firewall rules that allow that to work. But for some reason, it seems to work 99% of the time. And they worked with Code Mystics, who does a lot of the net play for like Street
Hmm.
Fighter on the Switch, right? So they're sending what is it called, all the little rules of like, when there's collisions or when two people are trying to compete against each other and it makes the decision that this happens, it'll roll back. And so they have those technologies, but I wonder what the pro community would prefer. Would they prefer that in the cloud only, or is netplay accessible?
I mean,
or
I don't want to
acceptable?
speak for the fighting game community, but I know that the first answer is if any of them are done wrong, it doesn't matter. So if you have it in the cloud, but they're not using the right way to connect it, and it's inconsistent, and there's so whatever choice they make has to first not suck, and then from there on, I'm not sure if there's a consistent preference. Do any of these have webcams built in?
No. The closest thing they have is they add like a headphone jack, and it's set like NBA Jam. They made a firmware update where you have a headphone jack and you can trash talk to the other people, and that's supposedly coming to the Big Blue. It has a microphone jack, it has a headphone jack, and then Killer Instinct is their new one that also has online play and it has a headphone jack, but
that
no
just
webcam.
Seems like such a stupid.
But they do want to do
it's, rather than cater to people that are never going to be happy. Sorry, fighting game community, but you're all perfectionists, and I love you for it. But rather than cater to that, why not make it so much better of an experience? And then so you have the cameras on the other side, and maybe you put the cheapest, most garbage, small little 3-inch LCD screen so you could see the other people. Or maybe you log into your Arcade 1-Up app on your phone, tablet, or PC so you could watch the video go, and other people can as well, streaming online. But there's so many little things that it's like, if you're going to charge somebody $1,000 for a cab and it's not going to be perfectly accurate FPGA-based hardware emulation, then why not give features that crowd would appreciate more? Because, I mean, especially, too, if you've never streamed before, right? And you just want to play games with your family online, are you really going to go out and, like, figure out how to get a webcam or figure out how to work OBS or figure out Twitch? Or would you rather just plug in, press a button, connect on the server, and now, maybe above or wherever it is that's not in your way, you have a little screen where you could see the other people and you could shit talk and you could do all that other stuff. Like, it's the other thing why I always approach Arcade 1-Up discussions with negativity, is because every conversation starts and ends with, did they even ask anybody? Or was it just two salespeople that are like, hey, retro's big. Let's start selling retro. Let's buy the IPs and worry about it later. Like, so yeah, I mean, like I said before, maybe they already did all of this stuff, and there's very specific reasons as to why they would or wouldn't do it. But it's definitely not the impression I've ever gotten based on just products and price.
Right. The one thing that I think Arcade 1-Up did that was amazing is they hired this guy, John D, and he was from Capcom. Like, they literally, so Arcade 1-Up went to Capcom and said, we want to make a Street Fighter 2. And John was on the other side, like, saying, yes, you can have the license for Street Fighter 2 on your little cabinet. And then they poached him and hired him. And so working with him and talking to him, he's not super familiar with, like, the technology, like we're talking about with lag and compatibility, but he's very familiar with gaming. I mean, he used to work for Sony, he worked for Sega, and then he worked for Capcom. And so he's very familiar with especially the fighting community. And he's the one that's basically fighting for us, fighting for the community. And he's the one that the community talks to and says, we need this. And he listens, and he goes to those meetings, and he wins some arguments and he loses some. And so he's of that same mindset of, let's increase the quality, let's increase the feature set, like you're saying, like let's make it more accessible. Like right now there's a big complaint because the Big Blue has spectator mode, which is awesome. You can go in there and see, and we're talking about, like, there's some people that are really, really good at Street Fighter that bought the Big Blue, and they're just demolishing everyone who comes in and plays. But I can go and watch them. Or there's some YouTubers that are broadcasting some of these fights that are fun. Then the Killer Instinct comes out. People are starting to get it. There's no spectator mode. It's only one-on-one. And people are flipping out because they're like, your newer cabinet doesn't have a basic feature that we expect. And this is kind of the downside of Arcade 1-Up. They work with different emulation companies in parallel so they can hit that market timing. And so the one company they worked with always delivers on spectator mode. But then Code Mystics, who did Killer Instinct because they did it for the Xbox One, they focused on like no lag and like really, really great emulation, and they cut out spectator as a feature. And so hopefully it'll come in a firmware update, but it's kind of fun to see the community like flip out over that because it shows there's passion.
But I mean, so that is actually a really great, whether it was intentional or not, a great experiment, because if Killer Instinct comes down and pro Killer Instinct players can't tell the difference from, an original board on an LCD monitor, but everybody who buys them is saying, where's your netplay? Then that's all the proof you need right there is don't go for pro gaming, go for not shitty, more, general gaming where you could have fun features like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so it's a fun scene. It's definitely dominated my channel at this point. I put out videos on that, and the community, it's one of those things where, like, going back to our original part of the conversation, is we have to decide, like, what are you going to contribute to the retro community? And there's a lot of different contributors, like Steve, meeting him with you. That was amazing. I could see his brilliance and what he does, and he hyper focuses on, but he's also not very like a social person when it comes to YouTube. Doesn't have social media, but he still has these great contributions to the retro gaming community with his company HD Retrovision, right? And then there's someone like you who's like this networker, like you have the ability to, and a lot of people don't know about that about you if they just like, watch your content lightly. It's like you actually work with a lot of the different people in the space and connect them to other people and say, you would work well with this person. Let's, you need to consult on this product they're working on. And that's great. I don't really know what MySpace is, but I know that I can reach a lot of people in the retro space through Arcade 1UP.
So
content,
I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you could take the mindset of, I don't want to be the Arcade 1UP guy. I'm going to go do other stuff. And then you have 5,000 followers, which is great. But you don't reach as many people. So what's the better thing? So you end up getting pigeonholed as the Arcade 1UP guy, but at the same time, you're bringing the knowledge of somebody that isn't a casual emulation player. You're bringing the knowledge of somebody that understands both sides of, original hardware, low latency CRTs versus that. So I imagine, I'm just guessing that there's got to be times where you're like, I wish I could have done this today, but I got to do an Arcade 1UP thing. But at the same time, you're affecting way many more people doing what you're doing. So it's kind of like, it's awesome and frustrating at the same time, I bet, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I do a weekly podcast on Sunday where I talk about this, and it's kind of funny. I watch the, as a YouTuber, you look at the watch time, and there's certain times when there's certain topics where I'm like, okay, we're going to talk about aspect ratios. We're going to talk about how it's bad for Arcade 1UP to do a vertical, game, but hey, it's 4:3 and it's not actually 5:4. And what is that? You got 32 pixels at the top and bottom. That's black. It's not the end of the day. But what's bad is if they're stretching the screen and they have they chose a really bad filter. It's just horrible. You can see shimmering on certain games, And I would go into that and you'd see this drop, in my watch time. You're like, oh, he's talking about the tech, kind of nerdy stuff. And then at one point I was like, I'm going to keep doing it, And now it's almost a joke. People are like in the live chat, they're like, here's Justin talking about aspect ratios again. But then in the Facebook groups, everyone's talking about it. Like they're using the terminology that I kept explaining, and the watch time's not really going down anymore when I get nerdy. And so now I'm like, okay, let's see how far I can push it. And I really enjoy that because I hear a lot of people using the terminology that I express in these videos in other places, or other YouTubers that are like, let's talk about this subject. And I'm like, yeah, that's my, that's that's what I say.
How frustrating is that?
It's fine.
Though?
It's fine.
When there's somebody that very clearly watched one of your videos and now made that video on their channel, and it's just exactly what you said, and using the same terminology. Yeah.
Sure, it can be frustrating, and you got to have a balance in your mind as a content creator to be like, it's kind of funny because I was talking to a YouTuber about it, and I was like, I told him, like, you can use anything I say. You can copy my video. I don't care. And I think the reason why is that particular person, He's very good at, like Bob, like if you ever wanted to copy or highlight any of my content, go ahead and do it. You can make a reference,
but I'm going to shout
not,
you out the entire
because
time.
I know
that's the difference.
it could be that, and maybe you wouldn't, and that would be fine too, because I know how genuine you are, and your motives are not to like steal my views or subscribers or anything like that. It's like education. It's like, it's like getting the word out there on this certain subject. But there are a handful of YouTubers where I talk to them and they're straight up, yeah, I'm trying to steal your subs. And it's like, okay, that upsets me. It does. It actually does, when you're like specifically copying content for the purpose of like, bettering yourself, and that's it.
I think the reason I'm so jaded about this is because it's been happening to me for 10 years now. And it's funny because I'll read articles on major blogs and I'll be like, they copied and pasted that. I actually made a mistake there, but they copy pasted that too. Oh, this is making me so mad. And I get to the end and they're like, shout out to RetroRGB.com for all this great info. And I'm like, oh, never mind. That's it. Cool. Glad I could help. Glad I could spread the knowledge. That's all. It was a one sentence that just said, somebody else did all the hard work. We're just, putting it in our some of our own words out there. That's totally fine. It's only the people that present it as, hey, look at this 100 hours worth of testing that I accomplished to do this. And it's like, no, look at your 10 minutes of copying and pasting, you thief. It's a giant difference. And that's the stuff that pisses me off.
And I think the other piece is when you, and I've heard about this with you, like you reach out to that person and you're like, hey, don't mind you making the videos, but maybe give me a little credit at the end or just something. Cause it's almost plagiarism. You know what I mean? It's bordering on that. And then the person's like, screw you. Don't care. I'm gonna block you now.
So I stopped asking because I started to very quickly learn that mistakes happen. That's fine. That's why I try not to hold any kind of grudges. So it's very plausible that somebody had every intent at the end of their video and be like, shout out to RetroRGB.com.
Sure.
It's, the repeat offenders don't care. And, the only time I've ever, a couple of times, I think once recently, a bunch of my friends called one person out because it was really gross. They were legit, like you could see their eyes, like reading the article word for word. And then they took a project that I was a big part of, that I spent a lot of money and a lot of time helping bring to market. And they passed it off as if like they were one of the dev team and purposely cut everything. That was the only time somebody really a bunch of people called him out, and he blocked everybody, everybody that called him out. It was just one of those, which kind of cracked me up. But what used to happen to me was the opposite, in that like I'd go to these expos and I'd go up to the people that definitely copied and pasted or read everything out loud, and I would just go up to them and be like, hey, I'm Bob from RetroRGB, just want to introduce myself, which was kind of my way of saying without saying, like, I'm one person at the time, at least. Every one of them was a dick to me. Every single one. And it was like, really? I don't know what that is. I'm out of it. Like, I probably pretended that they didn't know or got frustrated, and it's just, I mean, we all have egos, right? Clearly mine is bruised whenever people steal my content, but like, I can't imagine like that's how you react when you're an adult. Like a grown ass man acts like a little child who just got caught stealing, and it just kind of blows my mind for that stuff. But the good news is there's far more good people in the scene than bad, and it's very easy to go down a rabbit hole of venting, especially with other creators who have to deal with the stuff like you and I do. But the point I always make, even when I'm grumpy and go down a nasty rabbit hole with friends, it's like, but that's not the norm. I always try to throw that in there, and there's just so many amazing people that, as we've seen with RetroRGB. I mean, do you have any idea how many of those people I highlighted that I just contacted out of the blue, where I'm like, hey, I don't know if you ever heard what this stupid website I'm part of is, but we do these things. Would you want to talk? And so many people they don't even know how I discovered their projects. They're not really even on social media. And it's like, I talked to so many people, and I got my hand in so many pies, and they'd never heard of us. And they're just like, turn out to be amazing people with great projects that jump in and help with other stuff now. And they're just, there's so many good people out there of every level, right? 1 million followers to the person that's not even on social media, that just, you stumble across their project and they're willing to help. So it's always good news. And I always try to make sure I tell people that, even in the midst of venting or something. So.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I remember when, we built the site, we rebuilt it, more of a blog. And we had all these goals, right? We're like, one of the goals were more contributors, more writers. And so how do we highlight them? How do we get it where it's very clear that they're the author of this post? And we've even added things where you can click on their name, it'll show all their
Yeah.
posts, and they can have a little blurb, and that was all really nice. And then, but early on, I was making a couple articles, and I was like, okay, how could I contribute to this thing? And I really wanted to do that for a couple reasons. One, I wanted to see if writing out an article is something that I'd be good at, and I could contribute that way. But also understand from a web design point of view, like, when you're writing an article, what are the difficulties of your site, and so I could kind of refine some of that process. But what I found that was really cool, and to your point about how there's great people out there, I put out an article and I put it to the group, and the group was pretty small at that time. I think it was only a handful of contributors. And I was like, hey, could everyone, kind of review the article? And Ray Commend reached out on the side. He was like, hey, I have some suggestions. But his suggestions were like college level, felt like, hey, it wasn't mean. It was like, hey, let me send you links to a couple of videos that you could watch that could help you rethink the way you're phrasing and presenting your article. Let me educate you on how to write great articles. And at first, that for a few seconds, I was like in my head going, oh, who the hell is this Ray Commend guy telling me how to write an article? And then I took a breath, I calmed down, and I actually looked at what he said, started reading the articles, and realizing what he was saying was gold. It was gold, And then I did an iteration. I was like, okay, here's a draft. And it wasn't published yet, right? He's like, what do you think now? And he's like, you're getting closer. And he complimented me on like, this part is a good direction, this part's a good direction, but these sentences are not quite there yet. Rephrase it in this way. And it was the evolution process. And I realized he was teaching me and training me. And in the end, I felt really good about the article, and he helped me out tremendous from beginning to end. Where I started to where I ended up with, it was like a completely different article, and it was much better. And I also learned that to do a really great job would take a lot of time and experience. So I didn't contribute a lot since then. But I've always come back going like, I think I could.
Yeah.
Because of.
But
help
I mean, that's
of the
what I
community.
love about the contributors. It's like, if you have, if you're a full-time content creator and you want to use the site to promote the stuff that's relevant, awesome. But there's also a ton of people that are just fans that this is one of their hobbies. So they might not write a post for months and then come back in when they feel like it, write 10 and then, not write one. And that's totally fine. It's a hobby. You approach it however you want, but everybody's always there to help. And, that's one of the things that I still have no idea the proper way to do it, but highlight some of the people that do a lot of behind the scenes work. And I feel like it would be easier on the content creation side, because on the dev side, it's like sometimes I'll start being like, oh yeah, I know, and shout out to, but then I realize if I say that person's name, that's going to expose the project we're working on, and I'm not supposed to. So I think it'd be a lot easier to try to find a way to shout out the people that help behind the scenes, because it's like there's so many good people, and like I think Danielle's written one article, but she helps like multiple times a week with multiple different things. So I'd love to find different ways to highlight everybody that takes the time to help out, and I have no idea how to do it. So I'm all ears if anybody has anything.
Yeah, I think we started. When was it when we started working together? I feel like it's like 5 years ago.
So it would be 4 years this April-ish, because that's when I started to go back.
All right,
full
4
time.
years. Okay,
It would be 4 years ago. Yeah. So, and we'd spoken a couple of times before that, but I think that was when we started, collaborating a lot on this stuff. And by collaborating, you doing 90% of the work, but like with other projects and stuff too that we're working on. So yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about where the evolution of the website's going, which is exciting and terrifying at the same time, because if I do it wrong, I won't be able to pay my bills next year. So that's always a little bit of a gamble. But
right.
I still like blog based. I still like the talks that we've been having about moving guides over to a wiki where people could monitor that in any kind of way they need to, both to keep the guides up to date, to make sure that people don't post garbage, because it's not gatekeeping if you're preventing people from writing terrible guides that are ruining their consoles. That's not what that word means. So yeah, it's interesting to see, and I kind of just want the focus by far to be making sure that the people behind the scenes get highlighted. And I wish there was an easier way of Because like nobody likes bluntness and nobody likes labels, but I wish there was an easier way to be like, hey, this is a casual creator. They're not a pro writer, but they always have a great opinion. So read the article that way. Or like, this person is super freaking busy, so they don't have time to write a big article, but they wanted to share something that only they really would be an expert in. So there's definitely no easy way to do that, because then that's, but just anything we could think of to try to highlight who puts what into this stuff, and maybe even just like a fancier about page would be better. I just stumbled across that the other day, and I think we left the about page from when I launched the site, and I was like, oh man, oh, that's gross. I should have deleted that like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So I started working on that a little bit, but yeah, we gotta figure out how to do that other stuff. But I mean, you're the perfect example, right? Like in the about page, like you should have like, your picture right there is like, this is the person who made this happen. But it's we just gotta figure out a better way to do it for everybody. Because I think it's awesome how many more people are jumping on board that have the exact same mindset as us, and in that we want to welcome everybody. And this might be my little expertise nerdy area, so I'm only going to post whatever I think everybody would want to be into. But oh, by the way, come follow me back to my channel if you're into this stuff too. Like I love that stuff. I think that's pretty cool. I hope to someday be able to migrate to that and to try to figure out what role I play in all of this for the much longer term, because I've never ever wanted me to be RetroRGB. I always wanted to be Bob from RetroRGB. So I'm going to try to push that even farther this year.
Yeah, one of the features, I think maybe we could work on it this year, but I know a lot of people want it in the past, but some type of notification system when there's certain subjects, if you get a lot of contributors to the site, right? And maybe you want to follow a certain person, or you want to follow maybe you're into Mr., right? So you're like, I want notified about every article about Mr. or something like that. How do you do that? Do you do that in a tweet? Do you do that? Does each individual person do that? And then they put their little plug-in into the site, so when they hit publish, it notifies their followers? I don't know, but it's definitely something that we've been talking about for a while, and like it would be a great addition.
I also, the social media integration to this stuff is terrible. And there's a lot of companies and sites out there that will do the opposite, where you post on them and then they go out and post on all this stuff. But I would also love to tie in with social media in that every time a post goes up, 5 minutes after the post goes up, because that's a selfish thing, because I can't tell you how many times I'll hit publish on a post, proofread it the third time, and go, oh man, I messed all that up, so I change it real quick or something. So after 5 minutes, have it auto send to different things. And I don't ever want to have comments on the site. That's a nightmare that I will never entertain. But I like people to have the conversation wherever they so choose. So if it's on Facebook and they're part of Facebook groups, bring it into that conversation and talk with amongst the people that you're already there. If it's in a Discord, you already have your group of people hanging out, so you don't have new trolls coming in. If you like the dumpster fire that is Twitter, that's fine. You could go read a bunch of people tell you how horrible you are just for commenting on a thing. Like, whatever you want to do is your thing. I like that idea, but it's really hard to integrate all that stuff in consistently. And there was only one company I found that I thought would do it, but it was like $250 a month for the service, and it's like, well, that's dumb. Like, I'd rather just save up my money and give you a couple of grand and be like, just write it for us.
Well, I am working on that for my site. And then if I come up with I'll think about that as I start to build that for my site and see if we can do that on yours. But the plan, there's a lot of people, they want to be notified when there's an Arcade 1-Up deal. And of course, I would want to eventually expand my deal website to cover more than just Arcade 1-Up and start tracking whatever it is. 8-bit2 controllers are now on discount for $20. Boom, the site tells you about it. And so it's on my to-do list soon and I looked a little bit at the Twitter documentation, and it doesn't look too hard to automate, directly to those interfaces. And then could I build something abstract that supports other social media as well? And we can get those costs down where it's just, it's just a little function in AWS that, costs pennies or something would be.
I love that idea for your site, though. I think things like the DE10 Nano and the Raspberry Pis, those are out of stock everywhere. So having notification when they come back up, and even when they get back in stock, having a notification when they go on sale, or, And once you get fancy into it, filters of like, we've all seen the Amazon sellers with for feedback all from the past 24 hours that suddenly have a DE10 Nano for $65. It's like, no, you don't. And we're never getting that money back. So like, filter out new sellers or something. And I don't know. That's a great idea. I think that could be pretty big.
Yeah, and in the past we've talked about it before. Anytime I have these ideas, and like, is this something we could do on RetroRGB? And that's something we could probably do. But I'm excited about our partnership, our friendship. We've met a couple times, and some of those networking events were just fantastic. Hopefully, we can do that again in the next couple of years, and it's cool to see the project RetroRGB.
Yeah, when the world opens back up again, I want to be doing a lot more of those meetups, because those were some of the most fun things I was ever a part of. So. Even the really weird ones too.
What's cool is that we got to do that.
I even love the weird one, like when Art had me set up the Virtual Boy station at a fighting game tournament, and I was just like, so cool. Put me in the corner, man. I don't want to be in the way. And he's like, no, I want you right in the middle. So when people come downstairs, they see a weird ass Virtual Boy on top of an RGB monitor, and consistent the whole night. I think there was only two 5-minute periods where people weren't playing, but all night people were coming through. And even people at first were like, well, that's dumb. Like 10 minutes later, they're sitting down and they're like, oh, wow, all right. You know what? This isn't bad. This is kind of neat. And yeah, even the weird ones like that, it's always I guess I'm an extrovert, so it's like that stuff I'm always drawn to anyway. But I always just thought it was such a cool thing to have, people that are wildly different in every way except they like video games, all hanging out in the same place doing the same thing. It was like that in the music scene too. You'd have people, every
right.
age, height, weight, shape, like everything you could imagine. And everybody's, especially with niche things like metal. I mean, you get in a room with a bunch of metalheads and nobody looks the same for the most part. There's always the tribalists that have to dress exactly like everybody around them, but that's certainly not the norm,
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of what we like growing up in Des Moines was, I was 18, 19 years old. And so Slipknot was, doing these shows before they were Slipknot with 25 people. I think I went to a Slipknot show where there were 3 people there. And in fact, yeah, we went to Omaha and there was 3 people. They were like, there's this new club that hired them to come out. We went there, 3 people showed up. It was a full Slipknot, their first album set before they were big. Funny. And it was almost like, it was insane. But taking an event like that, that's really cool. What you did on that, I wasn't in New York, but I felt like I was a part of it. It's like you brought it to the scene, and that's what I look forward to in the future is more events like that. And then even like the meetup that we did kind of turned into like Analog Frontiers, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it was like even I was watching that, like I'm in the credits on episode 2, and I was like, whoa. Like I was watching it. I didn't know it was going to be like, an extra. That's basically, funny. And it's cool that content creators are taking an event and turning it into something that other people can share. And like on One Up Weekly, when I did that with Retro Ralph, we tried to do that. Like we had this idea of what if we did reviews of arcade One Up cabinets live? Like instead of like, oh, I'm going to do a shiny, like we literally, I just got it. We're unboxing it. Let's talk about it. And it kind of turned into these social events where it's new. No one, and right in the live chat, they'd be long, like 2 hours long. And people are like, tell me about this. Tell me about that. And people felt like we were bringing that experience to them. Some of them wouldn't even buy the cabinet. They were just a part of the event. But I remember when you did the Virtual Boy Street Fighter champion, I was sitting there amazed, just sitting there like, man, this is so cool.
I was lucky. A lot of good people showed up for that one. You mentioned going to Slipknot shows. So you have a musical background as well. You play guitar, you sing, and all that stuff. Were you just in bands always growing up, or just kind of like a fun hobby? Did you ever go down a tour or anything like that, or?
Yeah, so Des Moines. Look, growing up in Des Moines was interesting. My brother, he's the real musician of the family, right? He became a producer. So he produced. Who did he produce? That was popular. I'm trying to think. What's the name of the band? I can't even think of the name of the band right now.
Oh, wow,
Imagine
really?
Dragons. There you go. Yeah, so Imagine Dragons' first EP, 4 songs. My brother produced that with an engineer that they do a lot of. So my brother actually was in Slipknot for a very short period of time. He was the replacement drummer. The
Yeah.
Pinocchio mask, like that was his
Oh,
mask. He
wow.
created
That's
that
really
mask.
cool.
Yeah, so he did a couple shows as a fill-in substitute drummer, but he didn't want to be in the band permanently. And then they replaced him, but then the new guy came and they're like, oh, you got to keep the mask. Like the Pinocchio nose mask is amazing. And so then that band member stayed. So, I was in a band with my brother growing up. And then, in fact, we were friends with the Slipknot. And so Sean Cran, the clown, he was, friends with us. And so when he made it big in Slipknot, the first thing he did was he called my brother and I, and we went to the studio and recorded an album
that's awesome.
with him, and called One Cup Fat. We never released it, but it was like the clown's side project.
Oh, man.
And he ended up turning it in. My brother and him actually recorded an album together with Rick Rubin called To My Surprise. It's a small little, it didn't get very popular because they kind of went for like a Foo Fighters vibe, not metal, and people didn't really like it. But yeah, my brother's like building studios, and I'm just a guy on YouTube. It's weird, so I do this weird thing where on my channel I go live and I play music, and it's like karaoke.
Yeah, I've jumped
style.
on for a bunch of those. I'm always the asshole telling you to do Rust in Peace or something.
Oh, I see. Yeah, and I always lose 1 or 2 subscribers when I do that, and it's kind of funny, but I do them occasionally because there's a small set of 40 of my viewers. I'll get like 500 views on it, and they reach out to me and they're like, dude, that was amazing. Not like my performance was amazing, but like it's like an event. It's like this thing where everyone gets together and we listen to music together, and if it doesn't get growth on YouTube,
you're good. That's those were always fun. I mean, you got a good voice, way better than mine. I am just good enough to be a heavy metal background singer. That's it. That's it. I could do the haze in every AC/DC song, and I could croak in key, but it's you have a way better voice than I do. So all those came out great. Those were always a lot of fun.
Yeah, I have learned that I keep doing them, I get better. And I was like, wow, I'm like 40 and my voice is getting better. How is that? And it's because I think about those shows and I'm like, okay, let me like I've been practicing chop suey like crazy, because I'm like, one of these days I'm gonna go live and just do chop suey, and it's like that's a hard song to sing, especially the end. But then I start reflecting on it and I'm like, oh, like if I keep trying to expand my vocal range, or there's all these videos on YouTube that are like talking about how to get those, a metal scream and how to crack your voice in such a way and get it prepared so you can get into that, that growl sound, and it's hard. I can tell you it's hard, but with practice, I believe if you put enough practice into anything, you can find your voice, or you can find what you're
Yeah, I mean, the way I always looked at vocals, it's like, you have arms, you pick stuff up. Everybody just, you pick up your glass, you pick up whatever, but you can't just, because you could pick stuff up every day, it doesn't mean you could walk into a gym and pick up a 200-pound weight. And just because you talk all day long, even if you do it, even if you're not a content creator, that doesn't mean you could sing, because it's a different thing. So you gotta work out, and just the way you would anything else. You gotta keep doing it. And the other thing too is everything you do live is always so much different. I mean, I always joke, I always tell the same story, but the first time I was like, they were like, all right, well, you got to sing the background parts in this song. I'm like, all right, no problem. Sang it in practice 1,000 times. And I get up and, I'm a ham, right? Like I'm a big extrovert ham. So I'm up on stage and I'm running back and forth and being silly. And the moment I opened my mouth to sing the 3-word backup part, my asshole slapped shut, my mouth went dry. I was just, like, I have no idea why I suddenly was afraid to be on stage, to make a noise that nobody's going to care about at all, because it's going to blend in anyway. But for whatever reason, I was like, oh shit, I got to sing in front of people? Like, that went away pretty quickly, because I am kind of pompous about that. Like, fuck it, if I suck, I suck. But, it's just so funny to see that stuff and how much different you perform live than you do in a room or everywhere else. And that's why it's always kind of funny to see some of these, like, super awesome YouTube musicians that everybody likes, that everybody enjoys their content and their songs, and then like they'll upload a live clip of them and it's like, you should stay on YouTube because that's not what you're good at
Yeah.
at all. And it's a different skill
Right.
set for a different type of, thing. So it's just kind of funny. And, like I said, I'm not shitting on that. I like follow a lot of those musicians and think they're cool, but it's playing live is a different beast. And I mean, just like Kiss,
Yeah.
right?
I've
How
been
many of
watching a
Kiss's
lot of
first albums sound like crap, but you saw them live, and it was like I actually never saw Kiss live, but all the Kiss fans were like, it's one of the
yeah.
best live shows, and it's like some fans are just live bands.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been watching a lot of Rick Beato. I
Yeah.
don't know if you got into him, a YouTuber that covered. Oh man, he's so good. But what I've learned is, yeah, part of the reason why I go live playing music is probably the same thing when you go live in a club, right? You suck. First of all, you never start amazing, right? And then you're nervous. And even live streaming on YouTube, like, you know what it's like. I think you've been doing YouTube enough where you're like, okay, I'm gonna press record, I'm gonna look at the camera, and I can just talk. And like, there's this mental thing at first where you're like super nervous, even though, if you know what I'm talking about, where you're nervous in front of a camera, but you're the only one in the room.
Once again, I'm
because
kind
you
of
pressed
an ass,
record.
so I don't really get that, but I do.
Are you?
There were a couple of random times I got that for no reason whatsoever. So I know what you're talking about, but after the first couple of
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I guess after the first couple of videos, I just didn't really care. It did take like 6 months for me to record with anybody else listening. Like I used to have to record the weekly podcast when my wife wasn't even home because like I don't know why I was so self-conscious about it. And now I could be like naked from the bottom down with half my friends in the room and it would sound exactly like this. And just, yeah, you just get used to it.
I gotta work on that. I don't have that. Like, so I keep on noticing that there's certain type of content that I can cover. Maybe I'm uncomfortable with it, whatever. It just brings that feeling back. And even when I do music, there's like, oh, there's no way I could do that. I would get too nervous. But I've been challenging myself. Like a month ago, I went live and I'm like, all right, I'm going to tell you my favorite movie of all time. And then I wait until 50 people join live. I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell you my favorite movie. What's your favorite movie? And then I reveal that I'm actually singing the song Aladdin, like A Whole New World. Like that went live and sang
wow,
A Whole New World. Yeah, which is, I did it because that's extremely embarrassing to do. And like something that like I'm even kind of nervous thinking about how I did that. And I hate that feeling. I hate it. And I'm like, I'm a YouTuber, but I'm not it's not my full-time job, so if I lose 500 subscribers, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not super important, but I did it. And the people that know me or follow me well, they're like, that was funny, And I was like, okay, cool. Like, and I was afraid. I was so afraid that people in the comments were going to be like, what is wrong with you? You're like a horrible singer. You like Disney cartoons and you're 40 years old. But the comments were like, that was fun.
It's so funny you say that, right? Because like I could go live pretty much anytime, and if people start making fun of me, I don't really give a shit at all. I haven't touched my guitar. I think I played guitar 3 times since I moved. So if I picked it up right now and started playing, it would be very embarrassing. But I also don't care because I know that's one of the only things I was ever good at. So it's like, all right, well, I suck today, but if it's important, I'll come back to it. But singing is just the only one where if you're like, I bet you $1,000 you can't sing the first verse of End of Heartache, and I'd be like, oh, I sing that song every time. I dared somebody at a concert who was covering it to sing it better than me or louder than me in the crowd, and I actually won that bet, by the way. But like online,
really?
Like, or not even online, but like in front of people live, like I was in the crowd. It was a joke when I did that. I actually sung it, not too terribly, but if you were just like, I'll give you $1,000 to sing it, I don't think I could make it through. I think I'd get really self-conscious and embarrassed, and I'd be like, oh, I think what if people make fun of me? What if I make fun of myself? Whereas if it was about my guitar playing or, how fat I got this year or whatever else, I could care less. I have zero, like, whatever, anybody wants to say. So I guess everybody has their thing. And I don't know why. I think it's because I know I'm not a good singer. And I think that makes it so much worse because it's like, what if I did the absolute best that I possibly could and it was still just awful? So yeah, that's definitely a thing for me. Or I don't know. That was always it. And, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be Axl Rose. I always loved all music, and I figured, well, let's be a singer. And then I was young, but when I watched Slash get up on the piano for November Rain, I was like, maybe I want to
Oh
be
yeah.
a guitarist. That actually,
There
that's
you
pretty
go.
cool. And I get into the groove more than I get into the singing. And then when I heard the Rust in Peace album, there was no choice. There wasn't, I think I want to. It's like,
Yeah.
you need to learn how to play guitar right now. And it's, I took a couple of lessons and
Yeah.
then managed to teach myself by finding tabs online. Which nowadays, if you're
Mm-hmm.
starting to play guitar, there's awesome YouTubers. There's, you know, Guitar
Yep.
Pro where you could highlight and slow down sections and play along with them. Like the tools that are available today are just limitless. Whereas back then, I was like, I used to be in math
Yeah.
class and I printed out just blank tablature paper on the library in high school. And I'd be in math class remembering the songs and writing out some of the tabs so I could share it with my friends. And it looked like numbers. So my math teacher thought I was paying attention and taking notes, but I was just
Oh
writing
my
out a
gosh.
tab. And I remember my
That's
friend
great.
Courtney's like, what the fuck are you doing? What is that? I was like, it's a song. She's like, you're writing a song in math class? I'm like, I'll tell you later. Don't get me in trouble. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I don't know. What's interesting is I've come back too. Like as a kid, like I could never play leads very well, and I'm still not that great at it. But like being able to sing Axl Rose that's outside. That's outside my limits. Like I
It's
want to
outside
sing
most
like
people's limits.
I'm trying to think of yeah, being able to sing that high and that clean is pretty tough. Doing Billy Corgan or Dave Grohl is a little bit easier for me. I think Dave Grohl has amazing tone that I'll never have, but being able to hit those notes are not as hard. But being able to play guitar, like the new thing I've been doing recently is like trying to learn the easier stuff that Slash plays. Like the first half of November Rain is not that hard to play. It's like it's all about
Yeah,
bending,
but
and it's really fun. But the end where he's like starting to just shred all, like I can't
so
play
the
that part
trick
now.
with Slash is it's not like you could line up 10 excellent guitarists and say, play this part, and it won't sound like Slash. They'll
Mm-hmm.
get the notes perfectly right. Like imagine Yngwie Malmsteen playing a Slash riff, right? It just,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to sound
Mm-hmm.
the same. You got to get the feel. You got to, I don't want to say off time because he doesn't play off time, but it's, it's not robotic to a click. You know what I mean? You have to, each one of those notes, you have to feel in the song. And it's kind of weird because I know some people, when they play that style of music, they need the whole band. So, like, if they had a chance, they would delete Slash's part off of the song and then play along to that. And
Mm.
other people only want the drums because they don't want everything else to affect them. So they just hear the drums to keep them
Oh,
in
I
the
see.
groove, and that's all they want to be hearing is that. I think that's how James Hetfield is actually. He only has Lars in his headset
Mm.
because he doesn't want any of the other noise in there. He wants to stay in his groove or something. So yeah, it's
Interesting.
pretty neat. The songs that I played in most other bands were just straight metal or power metal, which is a lot of fun. But the stuff,
Yeah.
somebody
Yep.
said my stuff reminded them of like a cross between Megadeth and Green Day, which I took that as a compliment. I don't really care if that
It,
was a dig. I thought that was pretty neat, but
well, even your
that's
intro
the one.
song,
Yeah,
right,
that's the
is
one.
kind of
Yeah.
it's heavy, but it's also I always thought it sounded a little bit like what's that punk band called? Not Green Day, but it's
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, the songwriter. Oh yeah,
Offspring,
okay,
right?
I can see that. Yeah, yeah. So the person I wrote all those
Mm-hmm.
songs with, like, she was super into Green Day and like more punky stuff. She was a
Yeah.
drummer who did a good job singing, and I obviously came in like the
Mm-hmm.
heavy metal steamroller. And when we put all those together, it was so neat. And that song, the opening riff of that. So we were in another band together, and I was sending her some of the parts that I had did. I was like, hey, here's lay some vocals over it and all that. And she's like, okay, what do you think of this? And she uploaded something to her music YouTube channel, and I was like, what is this? She's like, and
Mm-hmm.
I clicked on it, and there was a clip of her when she was like a kid singing and playing acoustic guitar, the three songs that are in that, or the three chords that are in that song. And the chorus was the same, the same vocal line. And for whatever reason, as soon as I heard the chorus, my whole brain just went, and that I wrote this whole song like that. Even that fast middle part, I was like,
Really?
I sent her the, and that it does not happen to me. I am not a natural born songwriter like that. I write riffs, not songs.
Uh-huh.
And I sent her that,
Right.
and she was like, "Oh, this is awesome. We need like a breakdown part, like something fast." And I was like, "I could do that." That was the the middle breakdown part. So that song came together in like a day tops, and there was a bunch like that. So yeah, we wrote
That's cool.
two full albums worth of songs. Funny, we got like 17, 18 songs done, most of them with lyrics. Still didn't have a title for the band. Still didn't have a title for most of the songs. We were both terrible at titles, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and that's one of my goals is to, while I still can, try to finish that off. I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe I'm depressed and don't know it or something, but like I love
Sure.
doing what I do, but there's just not enough hours in the day to do that too, because I think it's very emotionally draining. And I don't want to sound like a giant pussy, but any musician listening knows what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. If you said like, hey, come over and let's play some old Metallica songs, just pick the ones that you know, I
Mm-hmm.
could do that right now, and it'll sound like crap because I haven't practiced, but no problem. Come back, it's fun. But if you say, hey, I want you to record this part to this song, like I got to put everything into it. It's just who I am. It's just there
Yeah.
is no like show up and play the notes. Like if the whole thing doesn't encompass the way I play, then it's not getting emailed to anybody or recorded in studio. So that might be it. That
Right.
might be why I'm like subconsciously like, hey, you pushed yourself a little too far. If you'll break if you try to do that too. Why don't you free up some free time and then do that? But I really want to, and I'd certainly love to talk with you more about producing, where to go for that, because that was a
Mm-hmm.
nightmare for the first album, and it was mostly communication. So I take 50% of the blame, no doubt, on that one. But that was not
Sure.
my favorite experience. But the ironic side is, right, when we were in that band, Gina was a ridiculous drummer. She recorded all the drums on the album. She's a good
Mm-hmm.
singer. It's good enough a guitar to make it work live. I mean that as a compliment, not as a dig. But her twin brother, the whole family's naturally gifted. She basically like kicked the door of his
Mm-hmm.
room in one day and was like, "Come play bass for us. I'm tired of these musicians not showing up." And he like relearned how to play instruments to join. And we were always trying to find
Oh, nice.
drummers, and we found one that was awesome, but he didn't want to leave his neighborhood after a while, basically. Like, and when now I got a good friend of mine, Kendall Lance. He's the good drummer for Reign of Kindo, and then he just did another side project that I've been tweeting out that I loved. He's ridiculously good, and he's an awesome person. So I have access to him. We got Ronnie on bass, who I've done a few things with him for fun, and
Mm-hmm.
he's awesome.
Yeah.
So we have a bunch of singers we know that would step in and help, and it's like I have the people that I never had access to that are fun to be around, and that I want I
Wow.
want to work with, and I don't have any of the time or motivation to do it. So it's
Ah, it's always
yeah.
something. Yeah, that reminds me of a couple things. Like you did a podcast, with Renee and Steve.
Retro
What was it called?
Roundtable, yeah.
The retro. Yeah, the roundtable. And it seemed to me, and that was a huge inspiration for the One Up Weekly for sure that
Oh,
I did
cool.
with Retro Ralph. Like there's like a lot of other YouTubers that are doing these live streams, and they've contributed or they've said like, oh man, we put together a podcast because of One
Oh,
Up Weekly,
that's a great
which is no
compliment.
longer around now. Yeah, but then I would say they're like, oh, you guys started it. And I was like, no, we didn't start it. Everything in our show was a ripoff of the Retro Roundtable, right? And one of the changes that we made to it, though, the idea of let's just talk about technology, or well, in this case, we talked about One Up, but there was a lot of technology focused. Ralph and I were talking about having it be like 4 or 5
Hmm.
people, and I was like, I don't want to do 4 or 5 people. And he's like, why? And I'm like, the Retro Roundtable could not
Yeah.
do a weekly show.
Yeah.
How could they? There's 5 people that you got to organize to get together, and ultimately you did a set which were amazing podcasts. I mean, if you guys did it once every 6 months, it was good because it was like the fact that we even got it.
There were
Was
some crazy
was
characters
valuable.
on there too, but yeah, I mean that was the hardest part at the end was scheduling,
Right.
and all the drama that always came from that. I mean, I know it's hard for people to separate, but like when 5 friends brutally make fun of each other for 2 hours in a podcast and accidentally bring that toxicity to a product that we're talking about. Like, yeah, that sucks too. Like, oh, did you hear that Bob said that this product sucks on the Retro Roundtable, and there are a bunch of elitist gatekeepers that don't want it. And it's like, I was talking to Steve from RetroTech about that, and he got it. Like, well, unfortunately, he got shit on once, but not only did he get it, that it wasn't a personal attack, but he also was like, oh, they're right, let me delete that video and do a new one. And now, Steve's channel is awesome, and we're friends, obviously, and everything, but it's, most people just got offended, and then I'd be in email chains the next day listening to people's feelings about how I said their product was worth the money, but too expensive for me. It's like, I can't, I kept saying, I can't do this anymore, guys. I'm really sorry. And everybody didn't really agree with my perspective, but agreed that, it's too hard to schedule this stuff. So we might do one a year just for the hell of it or something. But, and it's funny too, you said that inspired yours, but that in absolutely no way, shape, or form would I ever consider that like you stole the Retro Roundtable idea. Like, that's the opposite.
Right.
It's not, you're doing your own thing, and you just saw the idea of, a bunch of friends getting together and talk. Like, right. I love that stuff. That's right. That is awesome. And I'm sure you feel the same way when people say they started their live podcast because of the One Up podcast.
Right.
So
that's right. Yeah, for sure. It's kind of interesting how that works. Like you put your foot in your mouth and you regret saying things, like, happens, especially when you're live. But like the last podcast I did, I brought in this guy, Michael B, the Game Genie, who's he's a very talented YouTuber, and he's great. He's funny and whatever. And I like messing with him, right? So literally I go live, and my goal is to look at Mike and get him to laugh, right? And so the entire podcast is about pinball, virtual pinball. Should you get a Stern real pinball machine, or should you buy whatever this Arcade 1-Up Pro line that may come out that's supposed to be, it's a virtual pinball, but it's supposed to be even better than their previous one. Which one should you get? And so I started out the podcast with, today we're going to be talking about pinball and how it's dead. No one's buying pinball machines anymore. The virtual space. And it's just a joke to Mike. And anyone who watches me regularly would know I'm just being, and I even say, okay, the truth is we're talking about this. So it's just a joke, right? But someone who doesn't watch my content, this guy Arcade Hollywood, who's kind of known in the arcade space, he made a comment on the video, and he's like, "It's not dead. What are you talking about? It's not dead." There's so many like pinball pinheads that would be so offended with what you said, and I was like, it was just a joke, dude. I was being sarcastic. Like, I didn't mean any of it. It was literally a joke.
It's rough. That's absolutely rough sometimes. Or
luckily he's a bright guy, so he responded with, "Oh, I get it." He was not mad or anything like that. He's like, "It's just a joke."
Yeah.
But some people, right? Some people are like, "No, I'm right. You're wrong."
I stopped arguing with those people, and it's rough too, because it's like, I really do want everybody to feel like they're always welcome at every event I'm at everything I do, whether it's live. Right. But it's just, sometimes not everybody's going to get along. Two good people just, always going to butt heads, and just some people just haven't quite yet figured out how to play nice with others, and some people never do. And it's unfortunately, sometimes it's their own fault. They don't care to even make any effort to. And there's a few people that I'm always wondering why more people haven't called them out on that. But so I try to always approach it with patience. Like, I remember how awful I was probably to be around when I was a kid. So it's like, weird and annoying, and I sort of kind of learned how to pull out of that, and I'm certainly better than I was. So I try to always give other people the benefit of the doubt. But at the end of the day, there's certainly been a bunch of times where the shit starts rolling downhill, and I start getting buried in it, and it's like, whatever you could do to pull yourself out. So I wish people that don't get the joke, I wish them the best of luck, but maybe my channel's not for me. And there's also been a tremendous amount of people that don't get why I make fat jokes. And that's the other thing that always, one of my friends was like, described it as a weird sense of confidence. And I'm like, I guess I could see it that way. I know what I look like, and I'm happy with where I am. I wish I was a few pounds lighter, but whatever. And some people get like massively offended by that, whether it's they think they're getting attacked, or whether they think I'm attacking other people, or I'm fishing for compliments, like expecting people to be like, "Oh no, you're fine just the way you are." And I'm just like,
"You're not."
Just a loudmouth blowhard sometimes that likes to make silly jokes, and I thought you can't get mad at me for making fun of me, but apparently I was wrong. So
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of different people, especially those who comment on videos, and maybe it's just them, maybe the problem's me, or like they took 2 seconds, or the common one of like, you say something 30 seconds into the video that explains something, but there's a comment that's like, you left out this part. I'm like, literally, I know you only watched 10 seconds of my video. You judged my entire content on my thumbnail and then came in and wanted to say something and then walked away. And what do you say to that person? Or there's this real common one I get, and I used to think the same way, but it's like, like with Arcade 1-Up, why would anyone ever buy that? You should just, and then they describe how they game, right? And it's this weird thing where you're like, do you want to live in a world where everyone does things your way?
They do.
Like, your way is the right
they
way.
They really do. It's
weird,
it's so
right?
strange. I just don't get it.
I can give a million reasons why. Yeah, you, exactly. Like you could go the other way. There's, why are you doing it your way? But here's a common one that I started getting. So I interact with these people that make comments. We do live streams, and in the live streams I ask questions, polls or whatever. And I've learned a ton. Like, so there's this one person that needs assistance. I'll make a video and I'll be like, if you need any help with this topic, comment down below. And they'll say, yes, I got lost at this step. And I'm literally like, try this, try that, right? Troubleshooting with them. And I think that's a fun way to interact on YouTube. And some person's like, okay, so I'm trying to do a firmware update on this. How do I do that on my phone? I'm like, well, you can't. You need a PC. He's like, well, that sucks. I don't own one. And so it's this thing. I was like, well, there's a set of people out there that don't own a computer, that are also buying devices that they want to play retro games, but they want to flash or hack or whatever. What do they do? But then I take that to the Facebook group, and there's actually people that are like, this is how you do it. So do you have an Android phone? The guy's like, yeah. You install this app and it'll actually allow you to unzip it and then flash it from your phone. And I'm like, wow, that's beyond. I never knew that. I learned that now. But you may say to that, that's why that person doesn't use a Raspberry Pi. He doesn't even own a computer. He has a phone, but he still wants to play retro gaming. Leave him alone. Let him have his fun with his, whatever device that he has. Maybe it's an extreme case, but it's still a case.
Yeah, it is very easy for anybody who has to deal with, constant negativity to just write the comment section off as like, oh, I hate comments. But I've met so many good friends that are like legit in real life friends through the comment section. A lot of the contributors and the, the people that we work with and do stuff with on RetroRGB all came from comments. And not only that, a lot of people that have totally changed the way I do like my video captures and my audio processing were people that came in with suggestions. So I really love it. And I've been doing this thing for the past couple of years where if I see a nasty comment, because YouTube's got the creator thing where you could search for a person's comments just by the person. So if somebody comes in with a nasty comment, I just search for their name and I see. And if it's like, good person thinks they're funny but they aren't, it's fine, whatever. I'm sure I was not only I that guy forever, I might still be, and then there's the person that has just nothing but positive stuff and maybe they're just having a bad day, fine. But the person that every one of their comments is nasty, it's like, all right, why? Is it tech stuff? Am I missing something? No, they're just being a piece of shit. Block, that's it. And apparently it's against the rules or something, but I don't really care. I don't play by the YouTube rules. So and that's helped a lot. That's, I'm only human. So I still do the thing where it's like, somebody leaves a horrible comment and I'm like, I do the search and all their comments are terrible. And it's like, I fucked your mom last night, block, ha ha ha. Like, I'm only human. Sometimes I got to throw one of those in there, but, in doing so, it really helped me learn like who's just trying their best, but sometimes having a bad day or isn't good at explaining. But it's I thought that was a good practice. It's really taught me. I've re-earned my respect for the comment section, and it's easier to filter that stuff out. And it's just it's funny too because the only people I've ever seen give me shit for deleting comments or for blocking people like that, the only people are 100% trolls. not be there's still one guy that says
Yeah.
I'm lying about lag, but I'm sure he's a flat earther and I hope he falls right off the ice wall, but like other than that, it's like it's just nothing but trolling. There is not a single thing that has to do with any facts or tech or conversation or opinions. It's none of that. It's just
Absolutely.
giant pieces of shit needing attention. And I'm sorry that's where you are in life, but go to Classic Gaming
Right.
Discord. They seem to love those people there. So stay the hell out of my comments.
No, I adopt almost exactly that same thing. Like early on when I was a really new to YouTube, I would get, "You're ugly. You have a big nose." Like, it's just like,
I have a Greek nose.
what? Okay, I guess I'm ugly. Sounds good. Don't know why you had to say that out loud. Sometimes people just keep that to themselves, and I'd block those. And I even got one the other day. It was just like, here it is again, Console Kits with another shill arcade one-up video. It's like a very specific attack, like, and then the details are just like, to me. And how do I respond to that? Do I say everyone has their own opinion, or then I do the thing where I'm like, let's see what their other comments are? Oh, all their comments are just basically like being mean to either me or other people. Don't care, gonna block you.
Other
right?
people, that's the other thing too. If somebody's consistently mean to other people, one argument, fine. I wish they'd be more of an adult, but that's the other thing. But yeah, it's funny. And the stalkers and obsessiveness is an interesting thing to see from a psychological point of view. Ralph had a couple that I talked about something he did, and it was probably 2 people each with 4 or 5 accounts, because all of these trolls have many accounts,
Right.
all of them. And it's so funny because I just was like, I didn't even, as soon as I saw the pattern, I'm like, it's definitely the same person. They even misspelled the same word wrong. They're copying and pasting or something. Right. And I just started, I didn't even respond. I just blocked all of them. And then I'll go into every time I get a new video, it was the same person. Like, stop lying for Retro Ralph. He's a shill and so are you. And I'm just like, man, the only thing that would actually have made that funny is if that was Ralph fucking with me. That would have been really funny. Other than that, it's just like, wow, this 1 or 2 people tops definitely, that always cracks me up. But yeah, they're the only ones that ever seem to have a problem with me blocking them, because now they need to go find somebody else to try to get attention from. So.
But then there's the other side of it, right? And I've had this a few times when I was first started making content. The content was kind of like, hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about the new thing that I want to share about this topic. And so, I was early. I didn't know how to make content. And this guy's like, you talk too slow, right? And he's like, your content is horrible. You need to be off the system. And I sat there and was like, oh, I'm going to block this guy. Oh my God, he's so mean. And then I thought, hold on a second. He took the time. So I respond to him and I say, could you elaborate? Could you tell me everything that I'm doing wrong if you have the time? And he responded, yeah, go watch this YouTuber. Notice the difference between the way you speak and the way he speaks. This guy talks too fast. Maybe pull it back a little bit. And I was like, okay. So on my next video, I'm like, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking about Arcade 1-Up and the new news. And so I was kind of like, and then like my views went way up and my watch time increased. And then I walked back. I'm like, yeah, I was boring and I was talking too slow, right? And it was like, that guy, that comment actually like made me better. So every now and then I look at a comment and I go, is this an opportunity for me to learn actually? And so I'll respond, could you elaborate a little bit more? I would love to grow as a content creator. And then I'll either they delete their own comment, which is really weird. It's like they don't want to have an interaction with me, or they'll actually give me good advice.
Yeah, I think when I first started out, I looked at other people like, well, how do I do YouTube? What am I supposed to do? I've never done anything like this before. Mm-hmm. And I was quieter, which is for me is weird because I'm a loud person in real life. And I said the same catchphrases that everybody else seemed to say. And I'm just like, I didn't really understand why I did that. And I don't remember the context, but I just remember looking at one of my videos like, why do I say that? Like, what am I trying to accomplish? And it's, well, I want people to feel like they're sitting in front of me when, just like these, I want people to feel like they've pulled up a chair next to us and are just hanging out, having the conversation. Right. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to be me. And sometimes I'm exhausted. And sometimes I'm, really excited about something and I watch it and I'll be like, should I dial it back? And I'm like, that's me, but that's who I am. So, it's as long. I think I told the story on another podcast, but in that same band, like the couple of the band members would always come down on me for doing certain things, and one time I was like, look, I record every show. Let's sit and point this out. And they're like, well, what'd you do over there? I'm like, I went over next to the bassist during the bass solo and butt bumped him. I'm like, I'm a silly fuck. That's what I do. Oh, all right. What about this? I'm like, that's how I stand when I'm playing that part of the solo because I have to brace the guitar to do the tap thing. And they're like, all right, well, what about that? I was like, oh God, what was I doing? I look so stupid.
Yes,
I
remember you.
So it was such a valuable lesson. So that's what I'm trying to do.
Sometimes you need a mirror.
That's what I was trying to do now. It's just like whenever I question something, I'm like, am I talking too long? Am I talking too fast? Am I anything else? And I'm just like, no, that's it. That's me. I re-record a lot of them, because I do a segment at a time for the 2 weeklies, but it's like,
I love the content where you're like, this is the 14th time I've done this take. I'm just going to do it. This is the last one.
Some of them are so frustrating because jump cuts to me, it feels so unnatural. Some people pull it off. Some people place it so that you feel like that section's ended and now there's a new section. Sometimes I do it just to be silly for comedic effect things, like when I zoom in and say something stupid and then cut to something else. But just the people that can't form 3 sentences and have to cut up every 4 words, it's like I can't follow it. I can't do it. So I'd rather waste 40 minutes recording a 8-minute section 6 times than do that. It's probably, I'd probably have a lot more free time if I didn't. But, like I said, I'd rather have content comes out where it's like other people could have done that better, but that's me. So it is what it is, rather than something where it's like, that's not at all what I meant. It's not the perspective. That's not, let me go back and do that again. And that was the whole, hypercrap thing from a couple weeks ago. It's like, that 10-minute section took like 2.5 hours, and finally I was like, what, let me just redo this whole thing and just do it in a way that I feel is the most clear and concise, just to make sure the info's out there. And I'll even timestamp it, so if people don't care about certain things, they could skip it. And I was just like, this is way too long, but it's the only right way to do it. So we'll see.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun, and maybe you enjoy that, talking a little bit about creating content. Like, for sure, like when you're using jump cuts as like a crutch almost, like that's when probably it's bad, right? It's like, hey, you are jumping around. It's because you're taking too long to speak, and it's super annoying, right? And then at the same time, if you just try again, like you're practicing, you get better at being able to talk without the big gaps, and that's good. But one of the things that I've learned recently from another content creator was kind of doing the audio jump cuts, but overlapping the audios. Have you ever tried that? Like, a lot of people when you're editing, you're like, I'm going to cut this spot out, like this little gap of air, like this, 2 seconds of gap of air. But there's this other content creator that says when he cuts that, he then in Premiere, moves it down and then overlaps it, and it still has like a 1 second gap, and it flows. You don't hear that pop. And it actually sounds really good. And even sometimes you'll hear the previous sentence over the next first syllable for a second, and it actually sounds good. It's now a creative thing, but it's not a jump cut. And then in the video, that's when you swap to a B-roll or something, so it's not a visual cut. And I've been playing with that. I don't know if it's actually a jump cut. It's just like an edit style. And you don't do it constantly, because otherwise that's just jumping around.
That's definitely a trick for audio that I would use, but that's still. I mean, you're still, if you're watching it, you still get that jerky, like that just makes me nauseous when you see it. So there's one guy. I don't know if you're into cars at all, but there's a car channel on YouTube, Haggerty, and there's one guy that does a lot of like funny stuff about old cars, and talks about how certain things work, but there's not other than for comedy, there isn't a single jump cut. And some of these sections are like 7-minute sections, so it's a lot of the same stuff I do, but like really good. Like way better than me. And I can't tell you how many times I've watched his videos because I enjoy the videos, but like I'll get to the end of that and it's like he might be reading off a teleprompter, but like he's walking around like messing with stuff and doing it, and it's just like, I wonder how many takes these take to get right. Like, is he a natural, or he just, farts it all out in one shot, or does he get it wrong 1,000 times and take a day to shoot this? But that they all flow so naturally, and I'm just like, wow, like that's I would have never noticed that if I didn't make videos myself.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of times when I see those type of things, I lean towards they're just that good. You know what I mean? Like, they have the ability to just, maybe they know the topic, they have confidence or something, or they're just natural good public speakers, something like that. Especially when you watch some that where you're like, they're talking for 7 minutes and you're like, that was one take, or that was one continuous shot. Like, there was no, and I stayed watching the entire time. Like, I didn't keep, I never looked away. I never yawned or wanted to change the channel. I was like, that's just,
it always cracks me up. There are some days that I'll hey everybody, welcome to this week's podcast, and like that I gotta do 10 times, and I'm like, oh, it's gonna be one of those weeks, isn't it? And then 3 hours later I got a 20-minute podcast. And there are other days where it just all comes out. And I went to Video Games New York one time to just do some like promo stuff for helping them sell retro game focused things for small creators. It was actually a cool thing. And it was like 9 o'clock in the morning, and I just got off the subway, and a couple of the kids that worked there kind of like looking like, oh, I wonder what this is going to be like. And I just murdered the first take, and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be one of these days where I'm just here all day. I'm so sorry. And Dan was like, it's all right. Take your time. Don't worry about it.
Like an audience too.
And for whatever reason, I just, there were 3 videos I did 3 in a row, in and out. And like, even one of the kids that like didn't roll his eyes, but when he heard me be like, oh, this is going to be one of those days where it takes forever, he was like, oh fuck, we got things to do. And like after the third one in a row, he looks around the corner like, huh, all right, cool. And I was like, I have no idea where that came from. Usually it's a lot worse, but yeah, it's kind of funny to see those things just kind of fall out.
Yeah, creating content's interesting. It's fun. It becomes a hobby on its own, right? And that's some people talk about, it's like, oh, Arcade 1-Up is your hobby, and it's like, it is, but also making the content is the hobby. And I know that it's kind of like music, like, I've been in bands all these times, and we would go play coffee shops, right? That was the thing I did with my brother-in-law. Every Friday, coffee shop, 3 hours, we'd play a set, and we'd figure out what the audience wanted, We were like, what does the audience want? They're like, oh, they want 70s song. Okay, we're learning a whole bunch of 70s songs, right? And then, like, I would play a set, and then I would start playing Foo Fighters, right? And like acoustically, right? Like kind of like some of these like monkey wrench, don't want to be your monkey wrench, like heavy on the acoustic. And people are like $20 tips. They're like, well, there's this thing, like people really enjoy like listening to the 70s. And then all of a sudden you go to this hard rock, and you make their day, right? And so sometimes I compare some of that to other things. Like if I was to do my own band, it would probably be, alternative music, 90s, a Green Day, a Foo Fighters, Smashing Pumpkins, that type of music. But when you get an audience of people and you're playing like covers, right? You kind of play whatever. And so I like being a musician. I like recording. I like the process or playing in front of a crowd, right? And then so I have an Arcade 1-Up channel, and maybe that's the analogy. It's like Arcade 1-Up is the thing that people enjoy. I like performing, I like talking, I like the podcast style, and there's a group of people that enjoy me playing the Arcade 1-Up, and I like the reach that I can get in that, or teaching people about the retro scene. And then maybe my taste in music will change over time, but right now I'm sticking with the topic of Arcade 1-Up because I enjoy it. A lot of people ask, why aren't you covering At Games? Why aren't you covering the other home arcades? And I'm not interested in that. So there is a thing where it's like, I don't play country music. I just don't play country music. I don't like country music. I appreciate it. Taylor Swift is kind of cool, but arguably maybe she's not country music. But there's just some songs I would never play, but I'll play Metallica if I
think that's a great analogy though.
Foo Fighters.
I think, I definitely at some point want to try to branch out a little bit just for my own sanity, and it's just a balance of that. Like, I got a bunch of like motion light cameras outside just to make it easier to see when people are coming over, and there's a bunch of animals that run through. There's like a fox and stuff. So, but like I watched a couple of reviews on them. I watched a bunch of reviews, and they're all terrible. And I know that's a really arrogant thing to say, but the reason they're terrible is because there are people that are only playing in the box of the one thing that they're reviewing. And that's the one thing that I can bring to the table is that, like, okay, I've been doing product development and product QA testing for like 20 years on top of the, you know, whatever IT stuff I did, you know, through that whole time. And I have the knowledge of networking, you know, enough to see how this plays in. And I have the knowledge of security. So, you know, and I've did camera work before with other stuff. So it's like, I bet you I could put into perspective a lot of things that the reviewers just couldn't because they didn't have the same background. I was like, I bet you, you know, but how many people would want to go to, you know, RetroRGB's YouTube channel and look at a video about motion tracking, you know, floodlight cameras in the backyard? And it's like,
of course, I want to see you cover that. I don't know how you would do it as a content creator, how you would do it, but I think you do well.
Yeah, I mean, and I, you know, now I don't want to be the camera guy, but I want to do one review on that just to say, hey, here's what's out there, and you know,
how much would you hate if you make that video, gets 1 million views, and you're like, well, I need to pivot to do cameras now.
Only thing,
or would you say no? I'm not doing that. I don't care what the algorithm says.
The only thing is, I've always talked about how to deal with all of the accounts under the name RetroRGB when I'm trying to separate myself from the association to make it more about the community. So if I started, you know, Bob, YouTube/Bob, and it went viral on that, I would be very grateful because that's, you know, that's just proof that I could branch out. But if it went viral on RetroRGB, I'd probably delete it because it's like, no, this is the opposite of what I'm trying to do. You know, which is why I haven't done any music stuff on there and, you know, anything else. It's just like, as much as I really want to do all of this stuff, I have to, you know, I really have to drive the point home that RetroRGB is about everybody in the retro gaming community that gives even the slightest bit of a shit on how to play their games. Whether it's composite on a CRT, whether it's an emulator on your cell phone, I don't care. As long as you care a little bit about the experience, that's who's welcome. And that's it. And I don't want it to be like, so RetroRGB is a camera channel now, huh? Like, no.
Right.
Or you know, or really is about you. You know, I guess is that ego? I don't know what that is. Whatever it is, I'm sure I'm wrong, and I'll take full responsibility. But I don't want it. I want to make sure that it's about everybody else, and then I'll start other stuff that I could have some fun on. But you know, we'll kind of see.
Yeah, I struggle with that. I always feel like I'm not ready. I'm not ready to do other topics. I've tested the water. Like I was like, oh, I'm gonna cover analog. Yeah, I love analog. I have almost all of their products. I've supported them for so many years. I'm familiar with the technology. Let me see if I can take the challenge of I'm going to explain the analog, their new product coming out in a way that my viewers, the Arcade 1-Up viewers, would understand them because they're probably not familiar with FPGA. Because if they were, they'd probably complain about Arcade 1-Up more. So I did a video. It performed I think I've done 3 analog videos. They're all like 10K. It's the last one I did was really low. Like I think I talked about Pocket and like no one watched it. But then I learned a whole new thing. Like look at the algorithm. They're like 70 to 80% of your viewers that watched it don't subscribe to your channel. So it's this weird thing where it's like when I did analog, it got into an algorithm of people that are not regular to my channel, and it gave me growth actually. And I guess I could double down and be like, oh, I'm going to cover that as well. But for some reason, I didn't have any interest in it. It was just like, I said what I said on the topic. It's a new product. I enjoy it. Here's how FPGA works, and this is how you can understand it. And people were like, you did a good job explaining that. I'm like, okay, cool. That content's over. Like, I'm not going to like weekly be like, and this is the new firmware update for the new analog Pocket. And now it's jailbroken. And it's like, that's just, I mean, there's probably content creators
that's not what you want to do.
That.
Yeah.
That's great.
I mean, that's the number one thing is that you have to do what you enjoy doing with, you know, some exceptions, of course. Life is like that. But if you don't enjoy doing it, then there's just no point, you know, just because it's not going to, whether people know it or not, they're going to tell the difference, and it's going to make you unhappy, and you got to just figure it out. But I mean, it's a good question as to like, because I was talking to somebody about this, you know, the struggle the other, I guess a couple of weeks ago. I was like, oh, I'd love to do other videos than this. I want to do some music stuff. I definitely don't want to not do gaming. I just would like to do, you know, more things that encompass my life. And they're like, so you want to be like a YouTube influencer? I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, so you want to be like a personality then? You want people like, you want to be the person where people, follow you and see what you have for dinner. I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Mm.
And it's a little strange. And they're like, well, what's the point of doing all that extra stuff then? Do you not want to be the retro gaming guy? And I'm like, I don't have a problem with that. Hopefully most people in life realize you're more than just your channel, but like, I don't have a problem with that at all. And they kind of they weren't mocking me at all. They were just putting it and trying to put it in a different perspective of like, well, what the hell's the goal then of doing all this other things? Like, that's a very good question. I mean, the music one's easy. I would love to finish the songs that I started before my hands can't do it anymore. But like that, that doesn't have to be a YouTube channel. But so it's kind of interesting to think about that, because it's like, what would you want to do then if you didn't do Arcade 1-Up? Would you want to do general console mods? Would you want to do just a music cover channel? Would you want to do, and it's like, I don't know, underwear try-ons. I'm not judging. Whatever you want to do, if I can do it. But is that what you want to now become? And it's an interesting question to entertain, because it's just like, I don't want anything other than to just be me and do what I feel like. So,
right. Yeah. I don't really know, and that's probably my struggle. So I'll do these things where I'll just take breaks. I just like won't make videos for a couple of weeks and focus on other things in my life, and then when something interesting comes back in and I start talking about it again, and then, I got additional growth and people like it. And I go through a stride of I'll make, 10 videos or something like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. And what's nice is, for some reason, my channel's at the point where I can do that. I can have, like, I took the summer off essentially, and then I just started making tons of videos again, and I got right back. Actually, I had my highest month this last month, and that was after taking the summer off.
That's very cool. That's I would love to take a break at some point, not permanently and not a long one, but I'd love to figure out how to do that. But I guess, you're stuck as the, Arcade 1-Up guy for a little while, and I'm stuck as the weekly podcast guy for a little while, and I think we're both totally okay with that. So
yeah, I don't hate the topic for any, and it's really cool because you got your thing and you get to explore a lot of different topics, and I love watching your content, so that's great. I learn a lot as just a content creator as well from it. And then, we'll probably always venture out and play with things. I've been thinking about, like, it's actually funny. I got the Analog Pocket. I got it super early. Could have made a video on it. I didn't, because there wasn't really much more to say. It was like, there was also some great content creators out there that covered it really well. And I think I talked about it, and it was like, oh, and I did this interesting thing, I think, on one of my podcasts where I was like, if you guys are interested, these are the 5 videos that I watched that I learned so much from. And I was like, go watch, My Life in Gaming's video, and this person's video, this one was great. And I wasn't really like saying what they talked about. I was just kind of like, this is how they covered it. You got to watch it. And that was actually fun to do, to be like, just promote other YouTubers.
It's one of my favorite parts of doing this stuff too. And it's like, one of the biggest things I got wrong when I started is I thought that, like, if My Life in Gaming released a video on the Pocket today and I released mine tomorrow, that they would take views away from me. And that is absolutely not true. It is the opposite. It's the promotion gets it in the algorithm. People want multiple takes on the same thing. And I think I think when you have a big launch like the Pocket, there are just, I'm sorry to be negative, but the bottom feeders come out, the shills come out, and you really get to see who has a voice worth listening to. And for me, the one that blew me away, like, My Life in Gaming put out a spectacular video. No shock there. John Linneman put out a spectacular video. No shock there. Tito's video is like a week late. And I'm like, well, I love Macho Nacho videos. These are cool, but I wonder what he could add that everybody else didn't cover. And by the end of that video, I was like, well, if anybody had any question why Tito's channel is taken off, they don't anymore, because this is why he has earned the right to be here. He did his own thing the way he does it, without copying anybody, without trying to be like anybody. And even though I had watched those other 2 very long and very in-depth videos, he added perspective that I would have never thought of if I didn't listen to his perspective on it. So it's, and it was very easy to have his videos stand out amongst all of the other very good and not so good videos out there. And it's just, so if that was I said that both to, throw a shout out to Tito, but also to tell you, like, if you wanted to do a
Right.
video on the Pocket
Yeah.
and you felt like you had something to add, do it, because you might end up in a situation like that where you didn't even realize it, but you had a take on it that added a perspective that nobody else had.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Game Shacks. It was
Really?
funny. I think it was Game Shack. It was the one where he was actually like during like he's talking about the analog pocket and he literally starts eating the pieces that come with it.
No.
Like, did you see that? It was so funny. And then he was like even makes fun of My Life in Gaming, and it shows the scene of like him going to My Life in Gaming and unsubscribing, and it shows their count go down. Like, it was just in the background as the B-roll, but then he like resubscribes to them like as
I should give that a chance
later.
then, because I don't normally, once again, I'm not throwing shade, I'm not starting trouble, but I'm not, that's not my favorite channel to watch. But his video on cleaning cartridges, I think I laughed the entire time. My favorite part when he was like, well, we want to be careful with this, and I heard people use sandpaper, so we want to use the lowest grit sandpaper possible so we can have the least amount of grains on it. Like that one, I was in tears the whole time. That was absolutely wonderful. So maybe I'll give the Pocket video a shot.
I don't watch him. Yeah, I don't typically like watch everything he does, but the algorithm kind of bubbled him up to the top, and I gave it a chance, and then I was just like, he doesn't even, in the one where he's like eating the little, the things that you're not supposed to eat, whatever, the little packets. It shows him like go, not supposed to eat. He's not even talking about it. It's like in the background. It's like the B-roll, and he's like choking. And then all of a sudden it shows him holding the pocket and describing it. It's just kind of this subtle thing. That is pretty
cool. I like that. All right, I'll give that video a shot then. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. But maybe that's a good example of how content creators can be creative in different ways, and kind of do their own spin. Yeah. Yeah. I've been trying to think about that. Like, yeah, I cover Arcade 1-Up a lot, but what is it, the thing that I do when I cover it? And if I want to cover, like, I've been thinking about covering handhelds more. Like, I collect them. I enjoy doing them, and there's a space for that on YouTube. Could I be yet another person that's like, I'm going to tell you about the specs on this one or whatever? And I figure, well, in the next year or two, I'm probably going to buy 10 of them anyway. But I just don't. Like, I could, but then it's like the work of like, well, okay, lighting. Like I tried yesterday,
that's
getting the lighting right on the handhelds are insane. And so, like, do I just go, okay, the lighting's good enough, I'm just going to put out a 5-minute video or whatever? I don't know. We'll see. If I can come up with, I'm going to do a test run to just like see if I can enjoy the edit process or whatever. And if I enjoy it, I'll put it out there.
But I mean, you're never going to hear me say no. I would say absolutely do it. The only thing you'll ever hear me say no is if you're like, do you think I'd get more views if I turned into a drama channel? I'd be like, oh, fuck right off. Yes, you would. And you'd lose all of the subscribers that matter. It's the only no you'll ever hear from me. But absolutely, throw up some, some handheld stuff and just see what happens. And, if you like doing it and it doesn't get any views, who really cares? Right? It's not like you're worried about paying your mortgage for how many YouTube subscribers you have. So just do what makes you happy. And, if you're really into it, people will like it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the important part. I've heard that from multiple people. It's like, give the people what you want, the thing that you're passionate about. Because the thing that you're passionate about is actually when people start to follow you and like your content, it's because they like your take on it and the way you express it. And it's probably coming from a place of emotion or passion, and I get that from you. Like when I watch your content, of course, you're very passionate about the things that you're talking about. And then it reflects well on the content that you create. Like, obviously you have your videos that take you less time to create. And then you have your videos that you put a lot more time and investment into. And I know you would love to do those daily, like if you could,
no chance.
But it's just like, there's not enough time in a day. Right. But that's when I think you get to shine, and you do your bigger, longer videos that obviously put a lot of work into it, and it's inspirational, and you can see your passion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna keep doing what I like until I can't anymore, and then I'll move on to the next. But it's at least I could say I had a lot of fun doing it if ever it does have to end. So. Yeah. Well, this was awesome. this is exactly what I was hoping for. Just two friends catching up. Hopefully other people will find it interesting. But like I was saying, if they don't, it's still you and me how we would talk anyway. So if people don't like it, it's totally cool. It's not like we put on some kind of act to try to get views. This is just the shit that we talk when the camera's off. So
that's right.
Although I swear a lot more when the camera's off now these days. But, hope. Yeah, all my friends have told me that too. Because like on camera, I try to like, because, when I swear, I try to make it count or make it be funny. But like there's a whole lot of fucks stuck in here now that I can't get out. So like, I could it tends to spill out, and some of my friends think it's funnier than others, but whatever. So
yeah, it's all right. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Bob. I really appreciate it.
Hell yeah, we're definitely doing this again. I once again, I have no idea why it took this long. I think it's just because we're especially when we were working on bigger projects, we were talking on such a regular basis. It didn't feel like, oh, when's that podcast? Because we're talking all the time. But I'll make a better effort for that now. So
right,
cool. All right. Well, obviously, I will post links to your YouTube channel, your social media, and complaints@arcade1up.com for anybody interested. And, find all that in the description. Right.